IB Nation, what's happening? It's Notre Dame Recruiting Hour here on a Monday afternoon, bringing you the latest in Notre Dame recruiting. I am Ryan Roberts, Director of Recruiting here at irishbreakdown.com, joined by Sean Davis, recruiting analyst here at the site, as well as the host of the Lucky Lefty podcast with Malik Zaire that you can find on the CFB Nation YouTube channel or anywhere that you frequent your favorite podcast. So make sure to go give that a follow. We did a little bit of a pivot, to be honest, this week. We had a different show that was planned and kind of ready, coming down the pipe. And then, of course, obviously with the Tommy Rees news, taking the job at the University of Alabama as their offensive coordinator, there's some retooling and reshuffling. And now Notre Dame is in the area of trying to find their next offensive coordinator. And we presented, if you guys joined us Friday night, me and Brian Driscoll did a breakdown show of some of the names that you need to be aware of early. Now, obviously, there's different names that could pull into the conversation here over the next few days, over the next couple weeks. But there are a few early names that we had kind of identified as potential good fits with Notre Dame. So we wanted to run this show as, and I think this is going to be a really interesting topic, what this means for recruiting from Notre Dame's perspective, right? So we'll talk about some of the candidates, what they need to prove, what their past recruiting experience is, and how they would potentially fit from a recruiting perspective. Because this is not just about calling a football game, putting a game plan together. This is college football. We all know how much recruiting is paramount to success. After that, I got a little treat for y'all, man. We're trying to do a little bit more of some interviews on this channel, especially during the recruiting hour shows. So I got Carson Hobbs on the podcast, the Hop On Friday, did a little pre-recorded interview. So you'll hear from the 2024 cornerback commit out of Archbishop Moeller in the state of Ohio. You'll hear about his tumultuous recruiting process, eventually flipping from South Carolina to Notre Dame, his affinity for Notre Dame for a long time. A lot of great tidbits from Carson Hobbs in that interview. Then we'll hit a mailbag at the end, as we always do. So I already have a bunch of questions already starred, ready to go for, probably an hour away from now. But you all just keep throwing in those mailbag questions. Put an MB in front if you can. That helps me kind of identify questions a little quicker. That would be very much appreciated. But Sean, this is going to be a fun episode though, man, because we were just talking before the show. Obviously, you guys have been covering this a lot on the Lucky Lefty podcast. Me and Brian Driscoll have been covering it a lot on the Irish Breakdown podcast, of course. It's going to be an interesting search for an offensive coordinator. And we really want to take it not only from our initial opinions on some of these guys, but the recruiting scope. Because I think the one thing that we need to give Tommy Rees credit for, and that cannot be lost in this conversation, is, I think that we both have had our, concerns with him as far as taking that next step, because there was inconsistencies from calling a football game consistently from week to week. Mm-hmm. And early on in his tenure, because, he's been with the staff now since 2017, the offensive coordinator for the team since 2020, there were a couple missteps, in my opinion, with recruiting early on in his tenure, right? And we've documented those at many times at this point. Yeah. But, when we look at this, Sean, 2023, he gets Kenny Minchey, who's a fantastic player, in my opinion. 2024, he's got a 5-star quarterback and CJ Carr committed. I don't think that we need to give Tommy Rees the credit for that. He's done a tremendous job recruiting not only the quarterback position, but guys like Billy Shrout would probably not be on the roster right now without Tommy Rees's ability as a recruiter on the trail, right? So he did a tremendous job over the last couple years on that department. And I think that we need to highlight this important fact to begin here, is that an offensive coordinator at Notre Dame needs to be a dynamic recruiter. They have to be able to help to build these classes, because that has been a couple spots that we've seen for Notre Dame historically, at least recently, I should say, that needs to get back to that precipice, right? Needs to get recruited at a higher level. And I do think that Tommy Rees proved over the last couple cycles, and including the 2024 class with CJ Carr and Cam Williams, that he was doing a very good job at recruiting at Notre Dame.
And to mention that and build upon what you already spoke, which was spot on. Look, we have a defensive-minded head coach. It'd be totally different if this was Ryan Day or an offensive-minded head coach, and then you're bringing in an OC that can focus on other things, whether it's quarterback development, sharing play calling with the head coach, or going through that. And then the head coach can really spearhead going out and getting quarterbacks, right? This is a totally different situation. It's interesting when you point out Tommy Rees from a recruitment standpoint. I think on the previous staff, he stood out. He was a superstar when you look at the rest of the staff. Now, when you put him in the mix with Chancey Stuckey, Dylan McCullough, Jared Parker, it's like, okay, yeah, he's good, right? Because you see what an offensive staff looks like when they really go out and recruit well. Like, oh, snap. This is what an offensive staff looks like when they all do their job on the recruiting trail. So I think this staff took a lot of pressure off of him or allowed him to move differently. And in that case, he was able to focus on CJ Carr. Some people might say, well, if he was elite, he would have landed Dante Moore. And that, if that's what you want to say, that's fair. In spite of everything that was going on, I'm not about to sit there and say,
there's a lot of layers to that particular.
That definitely is layered. My thing with him is he was, in my opinion, key specifically to the Chicagoland area for Notre Dame in this recruitment. So I'm interested in seeing how they supplement that and bringing in a new OC. I'm interested in whether or not he is a strong recruiter. As you said, you feel like he needs to be a strong recruiter. If they find someone that's an elite play caller and they can find another way to supplement that recruitment, whether it's through, I'll give you a perfect example. Malik was telling me his time. He was like, dude, Mike Denbrock, who has been talked about for this position, like Mike Denbrock didn't coach quarterbacks. Like he just wanted to call his plays. And Brian Kelly really didn't say anything to us. He's like, Matt LaFleur was the one that really dealt with us. Now the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. So, if you have that situation where you have some, because Harry, we watched during the spring, Harry coached a little bit, but it was really his assistants that he really gave the keys to deal with the offensive line so that they can build up their resume and they can get better at that. And then at certain times when he wanted to jump in and say something, he did. It's hard not to hear Harry's voice at any practice. That's the one voice you will always hear at any practice besides Marcus Freeman. But no, I agree. The OC definitely needs to be able to recruit.
Yep.
Especially the quarterback position at Notre Dame. And I don't know how you feel. Mm-hmm. At some point, I would love for Notre Dame to get out of the transfer portal when it comes to quarterback play.
Because they don't have to anymore, right?
Yeah. And consistently be able to develop and recruit the position. To me, that would be a very positive sign of where the program is if they can get to that point. And then from that point, all the other connections, I think is going to come down to the conversation that each of these candidates have with Marcus Freeman. That's it. It's his decision, his level of comfort. He knows what he wants. He wants continuity in the staff. And more than likely, he wants to keep the staff that he has already in place. And whomever he talks to, the candidates will talk about them. I think all of them have some very interesting questions to ask themselves whether or not they will want to take this job for several reasons. But this is what I will say. Mm-hmm. I said this earlier today. I believe this is divine.
Okay. Not Dan Devine. We're talking about a different type of divine.
No. I wouldn't mind. I mean, Dan Devine won. I mean, look, I'm all for coaches that won national championships. So
I hear that. I'm
all for that. But no, what I mean by that is saying that, I think Tommy fulfilled a purpose. Right? It was number one. If he had left last year, this position isn't as attractive as it is right now, in my opinion.
Because the retooling of the roster, you mean? Or
retooling of the roster, but also from a PR standpoint, it gave Notre Dame an opportunity to publicly say, we will match. We are willing to spend. And that's something that a lot of people want to know up front as a candidate. Like, what are we working with? Because for a long time, there's been word out there that Notre Dame is a little frugal when it comes to, paying their assistants. And so they got the opportunity, whether or not it was truth, they got the opportunity to publicly say, oh, yeah, whatever Alabama offers, we'll match it.
Match it. Yep.
No problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that people know that and it's publicly put out there, yeah, it's just a more attractive situation. It just really is. Well,
Yep.
when you look at the players that are there, players they brought in via the transfer portal, the quarterbacks they have, if you line up Hartman, Buckner, Minchie, and CJ Carr as a coordinator, I'm like, okay, I'm set for like
You got
8 years.
you got a shot. You got a
At
shot.
quarterback,
Yep.
so yeah, it's a very attractive, much more attractive position than it was this time last year.
That's a great point, Sean. And I kind of wanted to comment to just a couple things before I get back to your point here, just in the chat. One, I don't hold the Dante Moore thing on Tommy Rees too much. I think no matter who that coordinator was, with what Notre Dame can't offer, like, let's just put it like that, right? Eventually that was going to not happen, right? And so I don't blame that one for him. And I know people are saying, Kenny called them, Kenny fell into his lap. I entertain the sentiment that he fell in the lap a little bit, right? Because he did kind of coordinate the last, hello conversation, right? But I will say this is that I don't think he would have done that if he didn't have a great relationship with the Notre Dame staff previously, right? So we got to give Tommy some credit for that. You don't have to give him all, but there is some part that you have to give him because he did build that relationship up and make Kenny comfortable to reach out back to Notre Dame, right? So just a couple points there. Sean, I would think it's a really attractive place, though, to your point, right? Because you mentioned it, the talent, the retooling. You got Sam Hartman for a year. You have the young quarterback depth. You have the wide receiver room that's improving. You have the stable of running backs. And also, you have a head coach that has already shown that he will trust the offensive coordinator to just do his thing, right? Yes. It's not like he's just going to have a guy looking over his shoulder the whole time. Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Like, he's going to give the offense coordinator autonomy to run his offense, right? Mm-hmm. To run his room. So that's I do think it's an attractive job. So let's get into a few of the guys again on the end of Friday's show. Friday night show. We talked about 9 different guys. We're not going to cover 9 different guys today. We're not because we don't have enough time, to be very honest. And some of those are not as likely as maybe others are that we're going to talk about today. So
yeah.
Sean, I know the hot name out there that everyone keeps talking about, and for good reason. I mean, I would be ecstatic if he was the next offensive coordinator at Notre Dame. We'll not hide that. Is Joe Brady, who was the former LSU passing game coordinator during the 2019 season when they won the national championship. Joe Burrow threw 60 touchdowns, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like that whole crew, right? It was phenomenal. Spends the next 2 years with the Carolina Panthers, the offensive coordinator. I have said this on the show, the last two shows that we've done. I think he was a bit of a scapegoat for Matt Rule, if I'm being honest. I don't think that was really I don't hold Joe Brady fully to that situation. And then he's the quarterback coach for the Buffalo Bills over the last year. There's some questions here. I think that there is interest, obviously. I do think that Joe Brady will entertain the conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's a super realistic match because I don't know if Joe Brady wants to come back to college and do the recruiting thing. I don't know, right? Yeah. But we have to talk about, Sean, the impact that he could have in recruiting and what he has shown us a little bit up until this point. So for people that didn't follow, again, 2019 he was with LSU. The previous 2 years before that, he was an assistant on the New Orleans Saints staff underneath Sean Payton. So you only have really one recruiting class where he was a heavily part of that recruitment, right? So we're going to look at the 2020 class for LSU, which 2019 season goes into the 2020 cycle. So he was a help, obviously, in putting this class together. That particular class, Sean, finished number 4 overall. And all these rankings I'm throwing out there are the consensus rankings, right? So I'm not going to talk about just 247. I'm not just going to talk about on 3. Like I'm not just going to talk about rivals. These are consensus rankings, which shows, everything averaged out. Where did this rank for people across the board? Mm-hmm. It was the number 4 ranked class as a consensus ranking. That class, and he was a big time recruiter in that class for Eric Gilbert. He was kind of vital for that one. Tight end to people that remember, he was very good before he started having some off-field demons, obviously. Coy Moore, talented wide receiver. And I'm just focusing on the offensive recruits of that class. That class also had Kayshon Boutte, who was in the 2023 NFL draft, or a talented wide receiver. It also had Max Johnson, who was the starting quarterback there, now at Texas A&M, and it had TJ Finley, who was a talented quarterback, ended up there, is at Auburn now. And yeah, so those are a few of the premier guys in that class. Offensively, obviously there was a great defensive class that year overall for LSU in 2020. But Sean, I mean, look, that 1 year looks pretty good on paper. Obviously, Joe Brady's not instrumental in every one of those players, right? Because he was a passing game coordinator. It's not like he's the head coach and offensive coordinator even. But the 1 year that was recruiting, he did have positive reviews. I don't know if he wants to recruit. I think he could have an impact, though, if he buys into it, because he does have a name, right? People, I think, would get like very juiced up about potentially playing for Joe Brady, right? Like a quarterback. Yeah. If I'm a quarterback, if I'm a wide receiver, a running back, why would I not want to play for Joe Brady, right? In the one season that he showed what they can do on the college level. So I have mixed feelings on it from a recruiting perspective because I just don't know if he wants to do it. But I do think that he has the tools that he could be a good recruiter if he did buy in. That's just kind of my impulse on it.
You love it because of, once again, the position that the wide receiver room is in now in comparison to last year. It's a lot of talent, a lot of bodies, a lot of depth, and the ability to use the different types of wide receivers in that room, the way he was able to use the different types of wide receivers at LSU would be very intriguing when it comes to play calling and implementing his offense. For me, the first thing I ask, are you hawking Ken Dorsey's job? Because Ken Dorsey has pretty much been blamed for certain things that happened with Josh Allen this year. That's the way it goes, right? You look at a kid, he declines, his interception goes up. Man, we just saw with Dallas. Dak Prescott, interceptions goes up. Who do they blame? They blame the OC. He gets fired. So does Joe Brady stick around as the quarterback coach to say, look, let's see if this thing goes right? And maybe if Dorsey leaves, I get elevated? Or does he get kicked out the door with Dorsey since he was the quarterback coach? These are, man, there's so many diverse conversations with each candidate we're going to talk about that they really have to ask themselves, because this is a great job. I think they all know it's a great job and it's a great opportunity. But really, it comes down to what that individual sees for themselves moving forward. And does he want to come back to college? Does he even want to recruit and the grind of recruiting the way that it is? Look, the staff he will be connected to will be a positive. That's the biggest positive, right? Because you have an NFL guy like a Dylan McCullough, like a Harry Heastan. They've done that. They've gone from the NFL and come back to college. And having that group of people around you, could that help supplement and ease it a little bit? It could. It possibly could. With Marcus Freeman taking the stance, I'm the lead recruiter on everybody. Could that help? Absolutely. But ultimately, within his heart, only Joe Brady knows what he wants to do in the near future and what he expects for the trajectory of his career moving forward. So, would he be a slam dunk hire? Yeah. I think the excitement within the fan base and the respect from the national media would be, wow, Marcus Freeman, that's pretty darn good hire. You've upgraded at that position, but there are so many intricacies to the conversation and everything else that makes it very interesting to see whether or not it would really be the right fit.
Well, and Sean, it's a great point. And I kind of want to open up that layer of the conversation because we didn't talk about that yet, right? But defensive coach-wise, from the defensive staff, there are some question marks as far as the recruiting prowess of some guys, right? We talked about Al Golden and just if he wants to recruit at a high level, right? We've talked about Al Washington and his missteps so far in 2023 and 2024. Offensive staff-wise, it's pretty dang good, man. It's pretty dang – I mean, honestly, right? Like, Jared Parker hasn't had to do a ton yet, and we've talked about that, right? But he got Jack Larson in 2024. He looks like he's getting in a pretty good spot with Carter Nelson, or, he's got another couple talented tight ends on the board of Walter Matthews, Jaden Riddell. I think he has a chance to pull together a really dynamic tight end group from everything that I'm hearing, right? You have Chancey Stuckey, who in year one pulled together a fantastic four-man class. He already has Cam Williams in 2024. And I do think that he's going to end up having back-to-back really good wide receiver rooms when all is said and done. Dylan McCullough has his reputation, right? He's a great developer of running backs. Got Jeremiah Love, which was not an easy pull for anyone in this past cycle. I mean, there were some big-time schools throwing around big-time money for Jeremiah Love, and Notre Dame had to compete, and they won out on that one. He got Jabron Payne after he asked out of his national letter of intent the previous season. You got Aeneas Williams in the 2024 class already committed. So he's done a tremendous job. I think that offensive line-wise, I mean, I'm not worried at all about what Harry Hiestan's going to do, right? From a coaching perspective, from a recruiting perspective. You got a good 5-man class in 2023. You got Peter Jones in 2024 as well. So there's a lot of good recruiters around you is my point, right? Like the offensive line, tight end, wide receiver, running back, a lot of good recruiters. So one thing that you make a great point, and I agree 100%, is that, yes, Joe Brady's a question mark from a recruiting perspective, but it's not the hardest spot to come into and be surrounded by that offensive staff, right? Mm-hmm. Even if it takes Joe Brady a little bit to kind of ease into his role as a recruiter, he's got some pretty good support around him, which I think you made a great point there.
Yeah. And as you improve the talent, hopefully you create a program that partially recruits for itself. Like if you upgrade, what quarterback in the nation does not expect Ohio State to have the best wide receivers?
Right.
Like if I'm a quarterback, Ohio State would automatically be in my top 5, right? Because I know I'm throwing to really good receivers. The same thing with LSU historically. I know that, right? Like people can argue right now with possibly a decline happening in talent at that position at Alabama, but 2-3 years ago, if I was a quarterback coming out, I'm like, yo, I want to throw to those guys. And hopefully as we see the skill positions increase and get better, which is Chancey Stuckey, Dylan McCullough, Jared Park, and everybody you talked about, when you see that level of recruiting, quarterbacks automatically put you on the list. They automatically want to come visit. They automatically want to come to a junior day or an Irish invasion. And that's where you build the relationship. And it might not be as strenuous as Joe Brady might not expect based upon the way they build things as far as the staff recruiting collectively and in unity. So you're right. It might not be that hard for him. And if they can express that and pique his interest, he might be someone that ends up at Notre Dame.
And every interview I've ever heard of Joe Brady, every time I've heard him speak, every time I've heard people talk about him, I do think that he has all the necessary qualities to be a great recruiter. It's just we haven't seen it, right, Sean? I mean, that's a limiting factor. And I also, just to kind of put this out there to everyone, we're not going to dive too much into the Byron Leftwich conversation today because this is a recruiting show. I have zero idea if Byron Leftwich can recruit, right? Like he's a guy that has never been a coach on the college level, Sean. Like how am I rightfully? Yeah, go ahead.
We actually talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
I do not know him directly, but I know people that know him very well. And he's an A1 motivator of men. He's just that type of guy. Educator, motivator of men, teacher. So all the other aesthetics of being a college coach when recruiting and things, it's like, we don't know, right? We have to allow him to make it through the NFL landscape after the Super Bowl to see if other positions open up and if he wants to stay there. But as far as who he would be to young men, he would be, from everything I know of him, a fantastic asset to have in the program. And that's just speaking from, the type of people that we know, Marcus Freeman, Dylan McCullough, Chancey Stuckey, and Jared Parker and everyone else to be. He fits that mold. That's the only, that would be one thing that I would say would definitely link him to Marcus Freeman, is that he fits that mold as a man. So other than that, there really is no.
Well, let me ask you this, Sean, since we're talking about Leftwich, right? Maybe he'd be a great recruiter. Maybe he wouldn't. I don't 100% know. Like you said, there's some qualities that tell you he would probably fit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any concerns with him as a coach, though? And I'll present it like this, right? He's been an offensive coordinator at the NFL level. He got the trust of Bruce Arians throughout the last few years. But I would say this, in the 1 year that he did not have Bruce Arians by his side, was not quite as good. And there are other things going around. Context of the situation is, I'm not just blaming Leftwich for that, right? You lost two of your best offensive linemen from the previous year. Tom Brady's a year older. I'm not sitting here and saying that's all Leftwich's fault. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying, though, is that for a guy that has been an offensive coordinator in the NFL for a few years now, I'm not certain how great of an offensive coordinator he is, just because I haven't seen a big enough sample size where I look at it and say, even without Bruce Arians behind him or backing him up or helping to set the landscape, I don't know how great of a coach he is, right? I think he probably is, but I don't know enough is my only skepticism.
Yeah, and that's a fair way of looking at it, very objective. And I think most people automatically just see Super Bowl on the resume and just assume a lot of things. But I think it was a 50-50 relationship when it comes to developing. I don't think he's had the opportunity. I'll put it like this. I don't think he's had the opportunity to create his own offense. I think he inherited a quarterback that knew exactly what he wanted to do.
Yes.
And he called plays into that. You know what I'm saying?
That's the other thing, too. That's the other thing, too, Sean, because I have Bruce Arians over top, right? And then I have Tom Brady underneath. And it's just there's so much tug and pull, man. How many offensive coordinators from New England have we seen, for instance, right? That as soon as they leave Tom Brady and they leave Belichick, they just flounder, right?
Yeah.
You think about Josh McDaniels as a head coach.
Yeah.
You think about Charlie Weiss. Everyone's very familiar with Charlie Weiss at this point, right? You think about Bill O'Brien, even to a degree. Just because you're under great coaches and have been around great people doesn't necessarily mean you're the guy. That's my only point. And maybe Byron is. I'm not saying he isn't or is not. It's just a question mark to me. And I feel like you can't shoot for question marks in this game right now because I do think Notre Dame's pretty close to a championship. I do.
I would be very interested in hearing him talk about his development. Because from what I hear, he's really good with quarterbacks. Really good with quarterbacks. I've heard great things about what's the young quarterback they have behind Brady right now?
Kyle Trask.
Kyle Trask.
Yeah.
I've heard really good things about Kyle Trask's development and how he's looked in practice. Not to say that Kyle Trask is going to be a great quarterback in the NFL, but that's directly tied to his work with Byron Leftwich. So it's an intriguing. And I think that is something that is fantasy. It would be a big name. It would be an assumption. Do I think it would be a spike initially from a recruiting standpoint? Yeah, because he's a known name. This is Tom Brady's offensive coordinator. So,
he'll flash his Super Bowl ring.
Absolutely.
And I get that.
Absolutely. Yeah. But everything you talked about, the corks and screws of everything and the nuts and bolts, we don't know. So it would be a question. And would Marcus Freeman be willing to make his biggest decision to date? Would he be willing to make that based upon questions?
Right. And he's very respected. He's been around great people. I'm sure, ultimately, that Byron Leftwich will be a very good coach wherever he ends up. I just don't know if he's right for this situation. That's my whole point.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the NFL guys, Sean. That's really on the list. We talked about Joe Brady. We hit quickly on Byron Leftwich. Let's move to some of the college coaches that are people that we feel are going to be in the conversation moving forward for this offensive coordinator job. I want to start with Andy Ludwig from University of Utah. He's the offensive coordinator, has been since 2019. So he's been there now for a few years. He's an interesting cat, Sean, in my opinion, because first and foremost, I really like him as a coach. I really do, man. I think he calls a really good game. I think that he understands how to utilize different facets of his. You've seen him when he's had multiple tight ends, use multiple tight end sets. You've seen him lean on running backs when he's had running backs like Tavion Thomas. And even before that, TJ Pledger. He's had those types of guys. You saw him at the end of the year when Brent Keithy, who was their other tight end, was banged up. They went to a lot more 11 personnel, and they got number 17 involved. They got Money Parks involved. I really do like Andy Ludwig, Sean. The question here, and it's fair, right? Because I think just from a coaching perspective, he might be my favorite guy on the list. I'll be completely transparent with that. But there is a question about how great of a recruiter he would be at Notre Dame. There is. And it's mostly just because the track record. And this has nothing to do with Andy Ludwig, because I've been listening to a lot of interviews with Andy Ludwig over the last few days. He's incredibly smart. I think he's got a good personality. I think he would recruit well at Notre Dame. I'm not saying he wouldn't. But when you look at his track record, which is what we're doing here today, looking at what they've done so far and how it could potentially translate to Notre Dame if they were the offensive coordinator, Andy Ludwig has been a part of these Utah staffs where 2020, the number 30 staff in the country, number 30 overall class in the country on the consensus ranking, number 33 in 2021, number 34 in 2022, and number 21 in 2023, which was the best class that Utah's had over the last few years from a ranking perspective. Not a bad ranking considering Utah, right? I mean, they're a Pac-12 team. They're not like the sexy, attractive Pac-12 job, right? They have to find some diamonds in the rough. And I look at some of the guys he's been key recruiter for. I look at Ty Jordan, who was a running back at Jordan. I think everyone kind of remembers the Ty Jordan story, right? He was a really nice freshman All-American player. He was the one that unfortunately lost his life during that season, which was very tough, obviously, for the Utah program. But they found him, who was a little bit of an under-recruited player. Money Parks is someone that I just mentioned that was a really good wide receiver for him this past year. Nate Johnson, who I think is going to be the future of the Utah program after Cameron Rising, he's a four-star quarterback. I think the highest quarterback recruit that they've ever gotten out of high school, if I remember the recruiting platform stuff. So it's a difficult one for me, though, Sean, because if you ask me how good of a recruiter can Andy Ludwig be at Notre Dame, I don't think I 100% know. Like, I think that he would be good, but the track record says he recruited pretty well for the situation he was at. But how good of a recruiter will he be if he gets to a bigger level of a Notre Dame? I don't know if we can answer that question right now.
For me, the bigger question, because like I said, you just explained them perfectly. And sitting in between you or next to you and Malik today, heck, we might as well just cut the check for Andy Ludwig, because that seems to be the the no-brainer for both of you guys. But no, he just talked about one thing he pointed out, and you pointed it out as well. He's a very resourceful offensive mind. Like, he's not the type to fold if things happen or injuries happen. He finds a way to stay productive offensively if he has to switch gears. And that's something you love about him. And he's had to do that with injuries with Cam Rising. He came in, I know they were expected to have 3 big-time tight ends this year. And I think at some point, at least 2 of them were down, 2 of his top 3. So, because Kincaid has been killing it, at the Senior Bowl week, and I know he was injured for a bit. And so he loves the tight end. That's something Notre Dame fans are used to. But he also recruits. Man, he always has this run after catch wide receiver that's able to make big plays. So when you ask about recruiting, it seems like if he's going to have tight ends, that he wants guys that can make run after the catch, because it complements the tight end in the running game. And if he can bring the kryptonite that he has for USC, I'm all for it. Like, if he can just bring that with him, I'm all for it. This is my only question with Andy Ludwig. Is this the right move for him? Because some coaches get to a position and get to a place and they feel really comfortable. He seems like a guy that is very comfortable at Utah. How big of a move is it going to be for him and his family to come to South Bend? For me, that's it. He knows it's a big-time position. He knows that. He knows it's a great position. He knows he's going to have better athletes and better quarterbacks than he's had, and a better offensive line. He knows that. Yep. He's resourceful. He's bright. He knows the opportunity. Once again, just like Joe Brady, what are you looking for right now? Yep. Where are you at in your career, and what do you want? Where do you foresee the rest of your career going and being? That's for me, that's what it comes down to, and what his conversation is going to be like with Marcus Freeman. Because Marcus Freeman doesn't want to have another situation where a guy is like, partially in, partially out. Like,
Yes.
I came, but no. If you're coming to Notre Dame, I want you to be here, and I want you to want to be here and be excited. So if he's excited about the opportunity, I'm with you guys. He's at the top of my list because
Yep.
everything else from play calling, resourcefulness, use of his players, and what he has on the roster. I think his number one running back, was was he a quarterback in high school and
Yep.
get this young freshman to come in and he's dominating towards the end of the season. It's like, okay, that's the type of guy he is. He'll get the best out of everything that he has in the kitchen. So that's the type of chef you want.
Well, and Sean, complete transparency, because I already put it out in the universe once for people that just joined the show. When we made the list, we had a bunch of names, right? I went back and I watched a lot of film on most of these guys. I've listened to interviews because that's more important to me sometimes, just hearing a guy talk and articulate his vision, right? Like I want to hear those types of stuff.
Yeah.
Andy Ludwig's right near the top of my list from a football perspective, man. What he's done the last 2 years, over 38 points per game at Utah.
Man.
And you talked about it, man. Dalton Kincaid's a good football player, no doubt.
Yeah.
Cameron Rising is a borderline draftable quarterback. He's not a great player. He's a good college football player. Tavion Thomas is a good college football player. Money Parks is a good college football player. Offensive line are good college football players. Not a lot of next level talents on that roster, though, offensively. Defensively, they usually have some dudes. Offensively, not great, right? Dalton Kincaid is going to get drafted probably in the top 64 picks this April. Everybody else is just kind of a good college football player. Yeah. And what he's gotten out of that roster offensively is eye-popping to me, man. Like, again, 38 points per game with that talent is saying something special to me, man.
And Rising was out how many games this year?
I can't remember. 2? I'll look it up. Yeah.
I think he missed a couple of games. Look, you know what else? And you can tap into this, right?
Sure.
Malik said something earlier today. He's like, Sean, you don't understand when you watch an offensive coordinator, he's so patient. He's so patient as a play caller. Like, he doesn't call things and put his guys in just crazy situations or give unnecessary motion to a play. Like, you don't have to show the tricks and prove how creative you are. Like, he's so patient and so wise in the way he calls things and sets things up. And I thought that was really important because I never thought about a play caller. We always say, man, we want them to be aggressive, attack, be on the attack. And he was like, no, he said the greatest play callers are very patient. They're patient guys that understand what's being afforded to them, and they strike at the right time. And they know when the right time. They can feel when it's the right time for a certain play call. So he comes across as that type of guy to me, hearing Malik talk about him. I was just wondering if you felt the same way.
Yeah, I mean, he's so creative, Sean, right? Like, first and foremost, when I hear him speak, he comes off very authentic to me. Like, that was the first thing I heard.
Yeah.
But when you watch the film, man, again, it's just the ability to adapt to everything around him is just so refreshing, because we've seen some coordinators, and this isn't a Tommy Rees shot. This is nationally a shot at some of these offense coordinators that I feel like just don't understand how to better utilize the players that they have to work with, and I don't feel that way about Andy Ludwig. I think that he really gets it. And we talked a lot on the Friday show about the places that he's been, right? And every offense from a year-to-year perspective has gotten better and better and better. And I would point at all those stops and say, did he have great talent? Yeah. Like, was it ever great talent? The Notre Dame 2023 version, if Andy Ludwig was the offensive coordinator, for instance, would be the most talented offensive roster he ever has. And I don't think it would be particularly close, in my opinion, right? Like, I think he's that good.
How do you think what would he do? Would he walk back into his office after looking at the offensive line and running backs for the first practice? Like, oh my God, I can't believe
he's going to have such a visual in his head, right? Because he's had 6'4" receivers. He's going to remember his 6'4" receivers at Utah. He's going to remember how they run. And he's going to watch Tobias Merriweather get off the line. He's going to be like, oh, that's a little different, man. That's a little bit different, right? So,
Yeah.
and I partially, and I'll be very honest, I selfishly want to see what Andy Ludwig could do with that type of talent. I do. Because I think that he could do an impressive job with that type. So, I have no questions about Andy Ludwig from a coaching perspective. From a personal perspective, everything I've heard is fantastic. How dynamic of a recruiter he could be, because I think he could be a good recruiter, no doubt. Yeah. Can he be dynamic, though? Yeah. I don't know that. And that is a part of the conversation, right? So that's Andy Ludwig, who I think is a person that Notre Dame is going to have their eyes on, obviously. I think he's a really, really good coach out of Utah, currently the offensive coordinator, who, we'll see what happens, obviously transpires there. Sean, we do have a couple coaches that we wanted to hit on here that we just talked about: Joe Brady, Andy Ludwig, Byron Leftwich. Byron Leftwich. Mm-hmm. We don't have a great gauge on all three of those guys from a recruiting perspective for the situations they've been in, right? Like we just don't know. The next two guys, we know what they are as recruiters because they have a long track record that we'll go through here. So the first guy that we want to hit on is Joe Moorhead, who is currently the head coach at Akron. Formerly, his last three stops before this were he was at Oregon from 2019 to 2021. He was also at Mississippi State from 2018 to 2019, and then he was at Penn State from 2016 to 2017. So let's start with the oldest part of this conversation here, Sean. Let's talk about the opportunity he had at Penn State. Obviously, he did a tremendous job coaching there with Trace McSorley, Saquon Barkley, put up some great numbers. As a recruiter, he was there for two cycles. 2017, Penn State finished with the number 15 class in the consensus ranking. 2018 was the better year, number 6 overall in the consensus ranking. So they had a tremendous recruiting class in 2018. Some of the key offensive recruits that Joe Moorhead was responsible for during his time at Penn State were quarterback Sean Clifford, wide receiver KJ Hamler, wide receiver Mac Hippenhammer, wide receiver Justin Shorter, running back Ricky Slade, running back Journey Brown, who, if people forget Journey Brown, he was going to be a phenomenal football player before he had the heart issue. We also had Jahan Dotson, that he was a part of those that recruit was a part of the 2018 recruiting class. He also signed Zach Kuntz, star tight end that's at Old Dominion now, who's actually part of the 2023 NFL draft. And Pat Fryermuth was a part of that class as well. He got Juice Scruggs, Rasheed Walker on the offensive line. So a lot of really good names, obviously, during his time at Penn State. He then goes to Mississippi State, where in 2 years, they had the number 24 class in 2019. So a pretty nice class for what Mississippi State typically does, and number 28 in 2020. So they recruited at a pretty good level while Joe Moorhead was the offensive coordinator at Mississippi State. Some of his notables there were offensive tackle Charles Cross, who was a top 10 draft pick just last year in the 2022 NFL draft. Quarterback Garrett Schrader, who people should remember, obviously is the Syracuse's starting quarterback now. Running back Joquavius Marks, who's a talented player for them. Running back Dylan Johnson, who was a very good player at Mississippi State, is in the transfer portal. I think he may have transferred somewhere. I forget where he went. Malik Heath, wide receiver. And quarterback Will Rogers, who's had a really nice start to his career, obviously, at Mississippi State. Then, Sean, the most recent stop before Akron was Oregon. In 2 years at Oregon, number 12 ranked class in the consensus in 2020. 2021, it was number 6. So a similar kind of vantage point to how Penn State improved from 2017 to 2018 is how Oregon improved from 2020 to 2021 under Joe Moorhead. Some of the key players that he was able to help recruit: quarterback Robbie Ashford, who is the starting quarterback for the University of Auburn right now. Quarterback Ty Thompson, who is still at Oregon. Running back Trey Benson, who was at Florida State this past year, was a recruit for Oregon. TJ Bass, who was an all-conference offensive lineman for them. Dante Thornton, who Notre Dame fans I know are aware of because Notre Dame obviously gave him a hard look coming out of the 2021 class. And then Troy Franklin, who is their best wide receiver on the Oregon roster right now. So, Sean, when you ask me, how can these guys recruit at Notre Dame? Aside from the next guy we'll talk about, because there's a little bit more of a very pertinent experience, Joe Moorhead can recruit. He can. He has shown that at his previous 3 spots. There's been some sporadicness as far as the quarterback recruiting that he's had. I mean, but even he had Will Levis, who's going to go in the top 10 most likely in the draft. He was a part of that recruitment as well. So I think that for me, Joe Moorhead's a very good coach. And I do think he would be a very good recruiter at Notre Dame because he has shown that when he has the assets around him, he has had a lot of experience and a lot of success as a recruiter.
Pretty good resources to recruit here in Notre Dame as well. You know, if you look at the staff, the way they move, the way they get around, the way they work together, it's a different. And I think whoever the choice might be, I think they're going to be walking into a situation to where they're going to feel a part of a recruiting team rather than isolated as a recruiter. And that's huge, you know, so that only makes Joe Moorhead even better as a recruiter, right? If you're saying he's a pretty good recruiter, you put him together with a team of guys to whereas everyone is included in helping each other get the job done, he's going to be even more effective at Notre Dame as a recruiter. And so that within itself, the quarterbacks he's connected to, I spoke glowingly from the time I recognized I really tapped into him when he was at Penn State. And I just remember that offense, and like Trace McSorley wasn't the most dynamic, skilled passer of the football, but he found a way, you know, and the skill position players were definitely dynamic. And you just pointed those out. So I have full confidence in Joe Moorhead as a play caller and a recruiter. I would probably put Joe Moorhead at the second spot, right behind Andy Ludwig.
Andy Ludwig would be number 1 for you.
Oh,
so you're Ludwig and
you
Moorhead.
guys have definitely pulled my coattail today. Because I can be honest, coming into this morning, he was not my number 1. He was not. But after doing a show with Malik and now hearing you, he's definitely number 1 on my list.
Yeah. And so I would say this, man. Honestly, over the last couple of days, there was a day I woke up, Sean, and I'm like, I love Andy Ludwig. And there was another day where I was like, I love Joe Brady. And there was another day where I was like, but Joe Moorhead has a proven track record, man.
And experience, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Multiple conferences. Yes. Recognizes different types of plays, which goes into Notre Dame's schedule. Because you're going to play, you know, a national schedule. You're going to play Pac-12 defenses. You're going to play Big Ten defenses, ACC defenses, and he has experience with all of those different areas. And then if you face an SEC defense, he's comfortable with that as well. So the experience he gives you is and the connections. Now, because you're talking about a guy as a recruiter who is nationally connected and knows a lot of coaches in different regions around the country. That's beneficial as well. So he probably comes in second on my list, man. I saw somebody mention in the chat. I never felt like, even though he is not a pro-style guy per se, I never felt like he went away from the run. Like I never got that feeling like he didn't want to run the ball.
Not at all. Not at all.
No, that's not the feeling I get.
And let's bring that up, Sean. I was going to save it for the mailbag, but it's a perfect conversation piece about Moorhead. So Berkshire Yank said, Ryan, does Moorhead's scheme fit? So if you've seen Joe Moorhead during his time at Penn State, Mississippi State, Oregon, whatever, they're very RPO. It's very RPO heavy to start out with, right? But there's a wide look. He wants to get the ball in space, right? Like we talked about, like KJ Hamler was a guy that he recruited. You talk about, you know, Saquon Barkley, obviously, Miles Sanders. Like he's a heavy inside zone, RPO heavy scheme. It is a very college-y spread offense. It is. Does it fit? I think it can fit. Yeah, because I think that, look, you're not going to ask Sam Hartman to be Trace McSorley athletically, right? Because Trace is like a 4.5 something, 4.6 athlete. Like he could run. So a lot of the RPOs off of him would also have the quarterback read option where like you can pull and run. You can still run that same offense or something similar concepts to it, but instead of a read where you have the ability to run or pass, just throw the football out there, man. And that's the read off of the inside zone play, right? So I think you can, Sean. And I think that a lot of those principles are already in Notre Dame's offense, which is kind of maddening. Like I think so I think it can fit. I do.
It's something else, Ryan, that we have to look at because
Yeah.
Marcus Freeman is not just interviewing these coordinators for 2023, right? So what you're pointing out, it might not be a perfect fit for Sam Hartman, but look at the next three. Look at Tyler Buckner. Look at Kenny Minchey. Look at CJ Carr. Oh, Moorhead, definitely. Joe Moorhead's perfect for those three quarterbacks that are coming up in his system. So it's the bigger picture, right? And Marcus Freeman has to look at that. He just can't look at 2023 and say, man, everything has to fit around Sam Hartman. You know, that coordinator can say, look, we can win with Sam Hartman this year. We don't necessarily have to do all of this. But if this is where we're going offensively, we already have the quarterbacks in place that fit that a little bit more. So, you know, for me, that's something that's going to be sit heavily upon Marcus Freeman to try to figure out in these interviews, like, okay, what is your view now for 2023? We know we have Sam Hartman, and then how do you see this offense progressing with the quarterbacks we have coming? So it's very interesting because Marcus Freeman, he's smart. He understands. He understands that this hire is very much or should very much be connected to not only Tyler Buckner, but Kenny Minchey and CJ Carr. He knows CJ Carr is paying attention to who this hire is and making sure it fits what he wants to do. So it's not just about 2023, but it goes beyond that as well.
Right. Well, and Sean, you know who would be the perfect Joe Moorhead quarterback? Perfect. Be Tyler Buckner. That would be the perfect.
Man, if you put a confident Tyler Buckner who has fully matured in Joe Moorhead's offense,
he's like a juiced up version of Trace McSorley, right? Like it's like that's like the ultra version of it. It would be a perfect fit into that offense. But I do think that especially Joe Moorhead is he's such an experienced coach as well. I wouldn't be super worried about like, will he make that fit, right? Like I think because he's had different types of quarterbacks too, right? Like it's not like he's just had Trace McSorley. Yeah. He recruited a guy like Will Levis. He had, Anthony Brown as quarterback at Oregon. Like he's had different types of quarterbacks. Nick Fitzgerald even's a little bit different than those guys. So I think he could definitely fit that type of style. So great question though, Berkshire Yank.
Man, he actually made Anthony Brown look
okay. Anthony Brown is on an NFL roster because of Joe Moorhead. Never forget that. Never forget that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, it's so funny. Last guy, Sean, that we want to hit on before we get into the interview with Carson Hobbs against 2024 cornerback commit to University of Notre Dame. A person that Notre Dame fans are very familiar with. That was Mike Denbrock, who is currently the LSU offensive coordinator. I'm not sold that this one is incredibly likely, right? Like I think that a conversation obviously has been had or will be had. If not, at least, just kind of a quick phone call to see if there's gauging interest. But Mike Denbrock was at Notre Dame for 6 years, from 2011 to 2016. He was there, Sean. And he was also at Cincinnati, obviously, after that, up until the 2022 season. Into the 2021 season. And then he was with LSU, obviously, this past year in the first year with Brian Kelly's tenure. So let's take a look, though, Sean. There's a lot of recruits to get through here. I'm actually going to start with LSU this past year, work my way backward because I want to end with the Notre Dame guys because I think it's going to be kind of a blast from the past for a lot of people in the chat. They're going to be like, I remember that guy. I remember that guy. So I would have hit it that way, right? So Mike Denbrock, number 6 overall class in 2023 with LSU, which, again, that's consensus rankings. What that class included Shelton Sampson, star receiver, Jaylen Brown, star receiver out of Miami, offensive tackle Zalance Hurd, and quarterback Ricky Collins were some of the mainstays on the offensive side of the football. Very good class that LSU was obviously able to put together in year one. Cincinnati, again, this is where the conversation gets a little jumbled, Sean, because Cincinnati's not going to be able to recruit as well as an LSU or Notre Dame, right? I mean, we know that. We don't have to explain why either. Cincinnati, though, just for argument's sake, 2018 class was number 49 nationally, number 66 in 2019, number 41 in 2020, and the number 45 class in 2021, the year that and then number 42 in 2022, the year he left. Key offensive recruits during his time at Cincinnati that you were able to close on. Running back Tavion Thomas, who you all should know when we talked about Andy Ludwig, was been the running back for Utah over the last couple of years. He was originally a Cincinnati Bearcat. Tavion Thomas, Leonard Taylor at tight ends. Josh Wiley, who was in the 2023 NFL Draft, is down at the Senior Bowl at tight ends. Alec Pierce, who Notre Dame fans remember, unfortunately, for his performance as a senior against Notre Dame, who was a second-round pick by the Indianapolis Colts. Yeah. Trey Tucker, who's in the 2023 class, wide receiver. Quarterback Evan Prater, who has just been a backup for Cincinnati so far, but was the highest quarterback recruit that Cincinnati has ever landed historically. Tyler Scott, a wide receiver who's in the 2023 NFL Draft as well. And then all-conference offensive lineman Jake Renfro was another guy on that list. Again, not a great comparison because Cincinnati's not going to be able to recruit with the LSUs, Notre Dames of the world.
No.
Now, Notre Dame fans, let's talk about what he was able to help with from a recruiting perspective during his time during the Brian Kelly era, Mike Denbrock. Number 9 class in 2011, number 17 in 2022, number 5 in 2023, number 11 in 2023. In 2013, number 11 in 2014, number 13 in 2015, number 15 in 2016, number 10 class in 2017. That was during this stretch. Mike Denbrock was a part of the Notre Dame staff. Key offensive recruits, Sean, you ready for this? I put it positionally. Some of the key recruits that they were able to land during that time. Quarterback, Everett Golston. Quarterback, Gunnar Keel. Quarterback, Malik Zaire, who Sean Davis obviously knows very well. Quarterback, Deshaun Kaiser. Running back, Josh Adams. Running back, Greg Bryant. Running back, Terrian Folston. Running back, Dexter Williams. Wide receiver, Will Fuller. Wide receiver, Equanimous St. Brown. Wide receiver, Chase Claypool. Tight end, Cole Kmet, second-round pick a couple years ago by the Chicago Bears. Tight end, Ben Koyak. Tight end, Troy Nicholas, second-round pick a few years ago of the Arizona Cardinals. Tight end, Alize Jones, however you want to refer to him. Offensive tackle, Ronnie Stanley, first-round pick. Now starting offensive tackle for the Baltimore Ravens. Offensive tackle, Mike McGlinchey, starting right tackle for the San Francisco 49ers. Offensive tackle, Liam Eichenberg. Offensive lineman, Quentin Nelson. Offensive lineman, Nick Martin. Offensive lineman, Tommy Kramer. Offensive lineman, Aaron Banks. A lot more than that, Sean. There were some guys left off the list, like Chris Brown, for instance, who was a really good wide receiver for Notre Dame, was a part of that stretch as well.
Breezy.
Yeah. Someone said Brock Wright. Yes, guys, I could have spent 20 minutes listing all the offensive players for Notre Dame because we all know their names, right? But obviously, Sean, he's got a long track record, a lot of good recruiting classes under Mike Denbrock. I'm a fan of him, how he calls a football game just in general. I think he's a really smart offensive coordinator. There is not a candidate on the board that Notre Dame fans have a better understanding of than Mike Denbrock, because he's literally been here and been in this position before. So your initial thoughts about Mike Denbrock just being in the conversation here, Sean?
Solid.
I think it's solid too.
Be a solid hire. They're absolutely solid hire. Do I get the same vibes that I get if it was Moorhead or Ludwig? No. But it wouldn't be a hire that I would be like, solid. He's solid. Everything I hear from his former players is that he's great offensive mind. You know, he can recruit, when he wants to. That was something that was told to me. And he's definitely not going to coach the quarterbacks. Like that's something he does not want to do. So now, who do you bring in to supplement that? Is it going to be one of your GAs or, you have to figure it out. But he is who he is. I don't think he's going to change too much. And his offense you can question whether or not his offense is as adaptable at this point as you might want to come in, especially when you're talking about Moorhead and Ludwig, right? But Notre Dame fans they're familiar. So I don't think Notre Dame fans will be upset. with the hire. But I think most fans would probably prefer some other names. But he has to be well liked because
Yes.
in a lot of circles he's very well respected.
I was going to say, Sean, I've never personally heard anything negative about Mike
No,
Denbrock. Just haven't
no,
heard it, right? Like we've heard a lot of negative stuff about some other former Notre Dame coaches. I've never
right?
heard a single bad thing about Mike Denbrock, and he's done a
No,
good job. I mean, did a good job at Notre Dame, did a good job at really good job at Cincinnati, did a
hmm
good job in his first year at LSU. I mean, he's just a good coach, man.
yeah, yeah,
I don't know if the upside is as high as a couple of the other guys on the list, but I think the floor is right there with just about anybody, right? Like he's a known
yeah,
commodity. You know he's going to call a good game. Like that's
yeah.
just where it is for me. I don't know if there's like we talk about like Joe Brady. If Notre Dame got Joe Brady, for instance, right, or even Joe Moorhead, someone like that, Notre Dame fans would be juiced, right? Like they would all be just they would all be in heaven, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if they would have the same reaction to Mike Denbrock. Like you're not
No.
disappointed, right? Because he's
No.
a good coach. He's a good coach.
Yeah.
But is he I don't say he is a needle mover in my opinion, but does he like ignites excitement? That's my only question with Mike Denbrock. That's my only question. So
I think we all agree that all of the names we mentioned today, we
yeah.
would perceive as an upgrade. I know I would perceive them to be an upgrade.
We have a question about that in the mailbag portion, Sean. So don't let that cat out too quick. We'll talk about that. Trust me. But those are a few of the premier names. Jason Candle's another guy that I like a lot, but we didn't bring him up in this show just because he's been recruiting at Toledo, right? So it's just a different animal. But I do like Jason Candle. I expect him to get a look, at least a conversation piece. I do. Talked about Chip Long maybe being in the conversation. Like there's a couple other guys obviously to keep an eye on, but that's pretty much the precipice, the main list that we're kind of working off. Could guys be added to the list? Sure. Could names be dropped off? Sure. There's no question. Things could change, but we expect this one to move pretty quickly. So that's the list that we have for the potential new offensive coordinators for Notre Dame and how it could potentially affect recruiting at Notre Dame, because obviously that's going to be a part of the conversation. Next, we're going to get in, Sean. We have a special interview with Carson Hobbs, 2024 cornerback commit out of Archbishop Moeller. Before we hit that interview, if you could just hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, hit that little notification bell at the bottom so you know when an upcoming show is coming your way. 5-star reviews are always very much appreciated on any of your podcast platform. Sign up at BorsIrishBreakdown.com. I've already put up a couple intel pieces about a couple recruits that will be on campus here pretty soon in the month of March and April. So make sure to sign up there. Also, Sean, I got a new hat, man. Got a new hat for Irish Breakdown, right? So go check. I also got a new hoodie, little gap closer hoodie. So you all should go check out the merch store as well. Got a lot of cool things. But thank you all for the support and check you out on the next edition of the Recruiting Hour. All right, Sean, we're going to play now our interview with Carson Hobbs, cornerback out of Archbishop Moeller in the 2024 class, committed to the University of Notre Dame. I had a chance to sit down with him on Friday to get this on the show today. Couple little quotes here that I had a couple of tidbits I just want to put out there. There was a little bit of a issue with his connection at one point in the show, but it was still a great conversation. I hope you all enjoy it. Let me know in the chat if you can hear it, just so I know, because I'll be on the back end, obviously. But this is my conversation with Carson Hobbs, cornerback commit in the 2024 class for the University of Notre Dame. Now joining the Irish Breakdown podcast, we have a commit in the 2024 class for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, Archbishop Moeller out of the state of Ohio. We have the star quarterback, Mr. Carson Hobbs, joining the show. Carson, I was just talking to you before we started, man. I know that you're a great interviewer and a great interviewee, I should say. I've had a lot of fun conversations with you over the last few weeks, man. So I'm excited for you to join the podcast, brother. How's everything going?
Everything's going great, man. I really appreciate you letting me be a part of it. Just ready to talk some game.
Nah, man, absolutely. And I'm excited to get a little bit into the recruiting chaos that kind of led to where we are, a little bit into your game and the next steps and everything. So, I mean, Carson, I think a great place to start, man, is for people that maybe didn't follow your recruitment too in-depthly, was that obviously you were committed to the University of South Carolina before you ultimately made the decision to, flip that commitment to Notre Dame. So Why don't you just take me through a little bit of I guess, the early portion of your recruitment, committing to South Carolina and why ultimately that switch was the best spot for you, best opportunity for you?
Yeah, so I feel like at the time, my recruit process, it was pretty early. And I started racking up some offers. I realized like, like each offer is getting bigger and bigger. And then you with South Carolina, I was on the phone almost every single day. Head coach Shane Beamer, you know what I mean? They were getting me like down to South Carolina all the time. And my ambition was always to, make my own path and make my own way for myself. So I felt like I didn't want to be in Ohio anymore. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to do something different that most people haven't done before. So when it was South Carolina, it was okay. I love the coaches. I love the facilities. I love the staff. And also nobody's ever been here. You know what I mean? Like not one person from Ohio has ever been to the school. So I wanted to be a little different. And at the time I'm talking to my parents about it and we're just like, you know what? We love the relationships you have with the coaches. And, we felt like their program at the time for corners, sending a lot of first round draft picks under that DB coach was it was crucial, man. So we felt like that was the place we wanted to be at the time. But remind you, there's only one place that I always tell people that I would ever decommit and change from, and that's Notre Dame. So, because it's Notre Dame, my dream school. So that was the only place. So I committed on July 29th, 9 days after my birthday. So, pretty big. And then I guess that's kind of how we went from there.
I love it, man. Well, let me ask you this, Carson, because you mentioned, Notre Dame's your dream school. That was the only spot that you were going to make the switch for. When did that, I don't want to call it a fandom, but when did that affinity for Notre Dame start? Like, has that always been in the back of your mind? Was that something that was more recent?
Since I was born. So it was like my dad brought it on to me because my dad and, actually my grandfather too, we just been huge Notre Dame fans since I've been a little kid. And, like my dad was the type of dad, like he didn't really care about my little league football games. If it was Saturday, he was leaving my games to go watch Notre Dame play. So, you know what I mean? Like that's the type of fan he is. He's dedicated. And, also as me, so am I, getting to go to a couple games as a kid, as a fan. And then, having it all fall into place is, you're no longer a fan. You're going to be one of the guys playing on the big screen one day. Is a crazy feeling.
Well, and let me ask you, because obviously you played Archbishop Moeller, which, for people that don't know, I mean, it's one of the best high schools in the state of Ohio, obviously, right? And a lot of great football tradition.
Yep.
I know that that's kind of a little bit of a pipeline to Ohio State, right? Like it's hard to get your type of player out of the state of Ohio usually. You already mentioned that you wanted to get out of Ohio. Is there a reason for that? Was there something that kind of was the back of your mind, like why you wanted to get away from maybe what was the norm over there?
Well, I wanted to experience newer opportunities and better things in my life than Ohio. And I felt like also, just like I was saying earlier, I want to create my own legacy and I want to take my own path and do it a different way than everybody else is doing. And, being a Notre Dame fan, understanding that that's in South Bend, Indiana, which is not in Ohio, it kind of all falls into play as of, what I want my career and my future to, be like. I've been in Ohio my whole life. So it's just, I've experienced a lot of stuff here with football and everything, and it's just not somewhere that I could say I would want to continue playing football in. So Notre Dame is giving me my best opportunity, leaving the state, new environment, new people, and I'm just excited to grow as a player and a person.
Well, and I was also in a similar boat to you, that I've been a Notre Dame fan as long as I can remember, my entire life, right? So can you take me through, I guess, as a fan of the school, maybe the first time that you got on campus, got to put on the blue and gold and really got to experience it firsthand? I would just love to hear that story.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So the first time I went down there was the Cal game. And I can say this is the first time they offered. I think this was in September. So week 5 football season, I get a text after my St. X game. Hey, we'd like you to come down. Just come down, kick it with the coaches and come down to a game. I show my dad, he's all hyped up, like we're going to the Notre Dame game, right? And at the time I'm going there, I'm not expecting an offer or anything, but I'm really just expecting to I'm still committed to South Carolina, remember? So I'm legally committed to them, and it's wrong for me to go to Notre Dame. But in my mind, I'm thinking, you know what? my dad's getting older. He's been a Notre Dame fan his whole life. When is he ever going to get the opportunity to go step foot on the Notre Dame field by himself again? So I feel like after all he's done for me, it was only right for me to repay him. So you know what I said? Forget it. We're going. And then, we get there and, blah, blah, going through the campus and everything. And the first time I stepped in that practice facility, like my eyes just lit up. Like it was really like a dream come true. Like, man, I'm really here. And this is before the offer. So, we're getting to the point where the game's about to start and we're in pre-games and I see Coach Mickens and Coach Freeman out there. And this is like, again, Coach Freeman and Orr Mickens didn't even follow me on Twitter. I had never spoken to him a day in my life. We get to the field and we just talking football, talking Ohio business or whatever. And he's like, well, just letting you know you'll leave here with a full ride scholarship today from the University of Notre Dame. So after that, my dad, he go over to the side, he start crying. I'm in my mind, I'm still committed, but I'm like, oh, no way. It's really got to happen. I knew it right then and there because before the whole process, the only school that was going to take my mind off anywhere was Notre Dame. And it really came. So that was the first time I went down there. And then the second time, I think I took my family, a couple friends down there, and we went to the Clemson game. I think that was the best game I've ever been to in my life. Like, we stormed the field after. Like, I really had a great time. And I think it was like that moment then and there that I realized seeing everybody in the stands, all the fan base, all the support and love. Like, I want to be able to play under that. It's huge. So I realized that, my dad always said he'll support me with whatever I do, but he wasn't going to support me if I didn't go to Notre Dame, but I do that. So, that following week, I kind of knew what had to be done. So I think it was just not even probably just a week or two after I told my head coach, after practice, I feel like Notre Dame's the place for me. It's my dream school. So, just taking all those visits down there and building those relationships, it truly meant a lot. And, after that, the rest was history. We got committed and.
Well, and you mentioned obviously getting to talk to Marcus Freeman and Coach Mickens, and I mean, obviously there's a lot of incredible coaches on the staff. What have those relationships been like as you continue to build them with Coach Mickens, who obviously, I mean, you mentioned South Carolina, right? I mean, they've had a string of great cornerback play, which you mentioned already. I mean, J.C.
Right.
Horn, Izzy McQuamu, Cam Smith, like it's been incredible. But Mike Mickens is really creating a pipeline with Cam Smith and Benjamin Morrison. What's it been like just to build a relationship with so many great defensive guys on that staff?
I realized with Coach Mickens that he wasn't a guy that just cared about, my football life. I felt like he truly cared about me. And, I always wanted to go play for somebody that I feel like I could consider family. And, for him, I really can do that. I wasn't comfortable going, 12 and a half hours away to South Carolina with one relationship with one coach. I have a relationship with all the coaches on the defensive staff at Notre Dame, and they're all like family and they're all great people, and I'm excited to get to play with them. So with Coach Mickens, his energy, it was more than just we were just talking about, so, hey, what you think about your recruitment? Like, he was truly invested on what I did with me and my life. And I was like, I really was feeling that. So, he's a really big reason why I chose Notre Dame too.
Love it. Love it. And then obviously, Carson, you're a part of a 2024 group for Notre Dame that, look, they just put together in 2023 probably the most well-balanced group that they've had in several years as far as recruiting class, probably a decade. And 2024 is off to a even better start, if we're being honest, right? I mean, obviously on top of yourself, you got Cam Williams, who's an excellent wide receiver. You got CJ Carr, who's a 5-star caliber quarterback. You got Jack Larson. You got Owen Wafel. It's a Peter Jones at offensive line. And now today, obviously, Leonard Moore commits to Notre Dame as well. So there's 8 tremendous players already in this class. I know you've gotten to build the relationships because you mentioned you were on the campus at Clemson, right? And obviously all the commits were there and were enjoying their time. What has the relationship building been with those guys who I think could end up being the best class that Notre Dame has had in a very long time?
Yeah, so we all realized, before, I think, well, at least for me and a couple other guys, we kind of talked about it in the group chat. We didn't really commit to Notre Dame, for just the football. We committed to Notre Dame for the program and for the academics, and we understand that it's more of a 40-year decision than a 4-year decision. So I feel like when we all go down there and kicking and stuff, we kind of feel like, this is home, and we're building a relationship with all the players and all the guys. And, me, myself, I try to do my best job as being a recruiter, right? Why not come to Notre Dame? You want to go to Alabama or Georgia for what? What are they? They don't got more than we got. So, you know what I mean? Notre Dame is really a top school in the country, and I don't think guys are choosing here just for football. You truly, coming to Notre Dame to be part of a family, like something special.
Well, and you've already given me obviously a lot of great background from the recruiting side of things, from the, your dad being so emotional when you got the offer and making that decision. I guess my question for it is what's going on now with Carson Hobbs, man? You're in the off season. I know you're just trying to, get better each and every day. What have you been up to recently, and what have you kind of been working on as you're kind of, get better this off season, obviously?
Well, I'm really just working on my craft. My footwork is some key that I wanted to work on, and so is my hands. Obviously, I want to be the most physical and, kind of active, fast feet corner I can be for my senior season. And, with the loss of our head coach, Mark Elder, as of yesterday, might even see me on the offensive side this year too. So, I got a lot of gameplay coming. I'm excited. I got track season coming up too. And really, I think I'm going to go to the rivals and the 247 camps. I want to get ranked 4-star on all platforms. So that's the end goal for the end of the year.
Well, I just saw you finally got your 4-star in the consensus ranking, which, about time, right? I mean, what's up? Of course, I got to ask, man, you're getting recruited by a lot of great schools. You're 6'1", 180 pounds, athletic. You were committed to South Carolina, an SEC school. Now you're committed to Notre Dame. What's up with these low rankings, man? Can you explain it to me? I really can't understand it.
I really think if I didn't commit to South Carolina until like the November part, I would have had all the rankings. I mean, my junior season, I had a great season. And the worst part about it is that we're in a defensive really rotating time, but it's like you play 7%, this 30%. You can keep everybody healthy. Like my senior season, it won't be like that. So hopefully this year, I should shoot up to where I want to be. I want to be a top 100 player in the nation at the end of the year. But the low rankings, they were just, I think because I stopped my recruiting process so early, I really do. Like I didn't truly get my chance to get the full, get 35, 40 offers. But, I got, in my opinion, the best one I could get in the country. So I'm grateful and proud that I got the opportunity to be part of that.
Yeah. Now, and you mentioned already getting out to some of those camps will be big for that ranking boost. Having a great senior year will be big for it. So you have time, man. I'm just always curious because I see a couple of these guys that are in the class with you, and I'm just like, it's not a 3-star player, man. Like, it's just not. Like he's much better than that, obviously. So, well, let me ask you this, man, because I talked about the class that you guys have building already. You already talked about trying to be a big recruiter in the class. How important is it for you guys now, just looking forward to, you're off to a great start. I mean, obviously, again, like 5-star quarterback, 5-star receiver, like you have a lot of great players in the class already, but how important is it for you to be that recruiter to help build something great here at Notre Dame?
Well, I mean, if you want to play with the best, you know what I mean? So we have the best committed. So I'm trying to reach out to the highest recruits and everybody in the country because, why not? If you truly come to Notre Dame, you'll truly see the family. And it's something special that we have to offer that most schools don't. And it's much more than just the football life. It's the academic part that'll set you up beyond football. And, the football is just a blessing to even be a part of it at Notre Dame. So we have both. And I'll tell you this, 99% of colleges in America don't have that, especially at the highest level like we do. So a lot of these a lot of recruits aren't really looking at the bigger picture. But when you come to Notre Dame, you know what you're getting yourself into. So that's why, we're at such a good start right now because I think just Coach Freeman has just done a great job of truly expressing, what I guess the Irish kind of give everybody the opportunity of doing.
Yeah. Well, and I'm curious about yourself as a player now, Carson, because I already mentioned the size profile that you have. You obviously have the athleticism to match. You're a guy that I love as a press man corner. Like I would just throw you into the boundary and just kind of let you do your thing with your physicality. Yeah. Exactly. And that's what you've already seen on your film. I guess my question is, are there some players, it could be college football players now, it could be NFL players. Are there some players that maybe you watch a lot, you model your game after a little bit? I just want to hear some of those guys.
Yeah, so I did model my game a lot after Jalen Ramsey until last season because he had a down year. But I like his physicality and I like how he's the star player that will guard the number one receiver on every team. So this year for me, it's been more of a Jair Alexander. He's very physical off the line. He's a good what do you call ball um
Ball hawk.
Ball hawk. He's a
Yeah.
good ball hawk, and he has really good eyes and patience. So I really like his gameplay, and he has really good feet too, and great off coming down off breaks, and stopping the out routes, slants, the comeback. So that's my type of corner. Like I like to shut it down from the 1 yard line. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to give you anything. Any route, like you got to get on me, you got to earn it because I'm gonna put my hands on you.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just so excited about the future of the cornerback position at Notre Dame in general because, I mean, I already mentioned it, like Cam Hart's coming back. I think he's an NFL football player eventually, right? Benjamin Morrison was just a freshman All-American.
He'll be a
Leonard Moore signs. Yeah. I mean, they're all incredible football players. Can you just talk to me maybe about the state of that room, though? I mean, being able to be a part of the Benjamin Morrisons of the world with Micah Bell and Christian Gray from last year's cycle, obviously Leonard Moore committing. Mike Mickens is really putting together what I consider to be one of the best cornerback groups in college football.
Right. So no doubt. And, I think not only that, but Notre Dame plays a lot of corners and a lot of nickels. So, I think there's about 4 or 5 guys that play each, maybe even 6 guys play each year. So I'm like, if I want to get my best shot to go to the NFL, why not go play under Mike Mickens? he's the right guy to do it. And you've seen the guys he's developed from, programs like University of Cincinnati turn, not really 3-star guys, but they were 3-star guys at the time and the first round picks, top 10 picks. So nobody else is doing that in the country but him. And, there might be some other coaches, but give him some time and he's just going to continue to develop and continue to build the best corners. And eventually Notre Dame going to be DBU.
I think it definitely could go that way, man. I really do because, I mean, you mentioned already, I mean, Sauce Gardner was a 2-star by a couple different platforms, right? And then he becomes he's a top 5 pick in the draft and he's potentially the defensive rookie of the year in his first year, right? I mean, Benjamin Morrison wasn't ranked as a top 300 recruit by anybody in the nation. And then he's a freshman All-American. So what Coach Mickens is building is obviously special. Carson, let me end this podcast by this. Obviously, there's a lot of Notre Dame fans listening, a lot of people that have been Notre Dame fans for a long time. Let me ask you, for people maybe that don't pay attention to recruiting as much, just in general, what should fans expect from Carson Hobbs when they gets to campus? Like, what should they expect from you as a person, as a football player? What can you bring to the program?
Well, I truly do want to bring leadership and try to build the family along as I go. And, from the player standpoint, I feel like you guys are getting
they expect from you as a person, as a football player? What? Oh, sorry about that, folks. For some reason, we had a little bit of technical difficulties there. My apologies. Just kind of rehash out what Carson was saying there at the end. Again, I apologize. I don't know what happened there with technical difficulties, but he just said that he is excited to continue the trend of the cornerback room that Mike Mickens is building, and he's excited to show you all the hardworking nature that he brings to the game, obviously. So, fantastic interview. We'll have the full interview in its entirety. Again, sorry for the technical issues there on the podcast platform. So, hope you all enjoyed that so much. Sean, if I can just kind of put a bow on the conversation with Carson Hobbs here for a second, man. Really intelligent young man. I think that people in the chat love the fact that he is very confident in his abilities, which at cornerback, you need that so much, right? I mean, because cornerbacks, no matter no matter how good you are, I mean, we talk about Sauce Gardner a ton, right? You can talk about the best corners in college football in the NFL. You're going to get beat at times, right? It's going to happen. So having a guy with that type of supreme confidence, I think it speaks volumes. A good young man, a great football player, and that's the type of players that I think Notre Dame really needs.
I love this kid. I've loved his excitement and his confidence from the time that he decommitted. And just think if he didn't decommit and Shane Beamer has still picked up Nicholas Harbor.
Man. And Sean, do you see what they're doing for 2024 right now, man?
They're doing okay, right? They're doing okay. So now that decommitment looks even stronger, right? Yep. Because he decommitted. A lot of people were kind of like, oh, well, South Carolina. Shane Beamer and his staff, they're doing a pretty good job of recruiting in 23 and 24. So big time player, man. We knew the 4-star was coming. We knew the confidence was there. I think we're both excited to see how he develops and what ultimately his film looks like next year.
Yep.
Because we think he's going to take a step forward. But to just match him, with the rest of the crew that he talked about and more being added to the hall in that room, Mike Mickens has to be one of the top recruiting, man, not just at his position, but just overall, like the job he's doing, identifying talent, going out, and the mentality of the young men that he's bringing in. They get it. And I saw a lot of people in the chat as they watched the interview saying, this kid gets it. He is, from what I heard, when they had the visit and he came in with the Smiths and everyone, his personality just kind of like was next level. And I think it kind of took a lot of people by surprise how charismatic he was. And so you have him, who's very charismatic. You have CJ Carr. You have Cam Williams, who has a lot of great relationships. This class in 24 is stacking up to be we know it's much further ahead than what they were at this time last year. But just the personality and the talent that they're bringing in, it's going to be a pretty good class. I'm excited. I almost wish I could see this kid on the field this year with the confidence he has. Like, man, can he play this year? But no, I'm looking forward to this young man, and I'm looking forward to what he brings to the rest of the recruitment of the rest of the class.
Well, Sean, you might have to make the trip out to Archbishop Moeller, man, Ohio. It's not too far, right? I don't know.
Hey, man, look. I keep hearing it. You know what? I'm starting to think that you and Malik talk on the side.
Why?
You guys always, it seems like you guys say the same thing. Like, man, you don't know nothing about that Ohio football, bro. You want to see some real football, you need to go watch. He's already on that, like, private school football in Ohio. So
nice.
He has me hyped to go see him and a couple other guys play this year.
Well, I mean, hey, man, it's hard to not get hyped after hearing Carson Hobbs talk about, not only his journey. I love the little tidbit on his I love the little tidbit about, his dad and how emotional he got, obviously, when they made the trip to South Bend, when he was still committed to South Carolina. So Carson is an incredibly intelligent young man. I'm happy that he's a part of the 2024 class, and I think that he's some leadership qualities, too, that can't be undersold, right? So That was my interview with Carson Hobbs, star cornerback out of Archbishop Moeller in the 2024 class, committed to the University of Notre Dame. Thank you all for listening to that. We're going to go to the mailbag next. Before we do, if you could just hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, hit that little notification bell at the bottom so you know when we have a show coming up. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, 5-star reviews are very much appreciated. Tell them Sean and Ryan are awesome. We love the recruiting hour. Also go listen to the Lucky Lefty podcast, part of CFB Nation. I also started a draft show that airs every Thursday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, if you all like that type of thing as well. So make sure you stay tuned in to everything we have at Irish Breakdown, but we're going to move on to the mailbag. All right, Sean. So we have a couple mailbag questions. Well, actually, I have a bunch of mailbag questions. You all can continue to put them in there if you want. We had a few super chats, Sean, that I wanted to get to first and foremost. From ICURN with Irish Luck. Thank you so much for the super chat. Said, thoughts on Carr getting poached by Tommy Rees? CJ Carr, 2024 quarterback commit to Notre Dame. Seems like he is a Northern guy. I mean, Sean, if I can start this conversation, and we had another question that was similar to this that we'll talk about, but I did have conversations with a few of the commits in the 2024 class leading up to Tommy Rees making that decision, right? And what I'm told about CJ, and is maintained through the transition that we are seeing right now so far, is that CJ's locked in and that he is just very trusting that Notre Dame is going to get a great offensive coordinator to replace Coach Reese. So, yes, he had a great relationship with Tommy Reese. We've talked about that in nauseum. But CJ Carr is also in love with Notre Dame. And I think that as long as Notre Dame hires a good offensive coordinator that quickly sells, I don't see there being any issues, not only just with CJ Carr, but with the rest of the recruits. So I don't think that he's going to get poached, because that also Alabama has a quarterback in the 2024 class, Julian Sayin, who Notre Dame fans are probably pretty familiar with, was on the Notre Dame board for a little while as well. So I think when you look at it, everything together, Sean, I am personally not worried about CJ Carr going anywhere. I think that he's sold up with Notre Dame at least as of right now, no doubt.
Yeah. My favorite part was when you told me one of the recruits kind of chuckled about the news and whether or not he was still locked into the class. I love hearing that type of stuff. But no, eventually Notre Dame. Would you say Notre Dame right now is a coach-driven program?
In what sense? Can you
In
describe what
its
you mean by that?
perception. Perception.
Okay.
You say Notre Dame, first thing you think about is Marcus Freeman at
Yes,
this
yes,
point,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
eventually that's going to change as they win. It'll become player-driven, right? Nick Saban is Nick Saban. When you said Alabama, the first thing that came to your mind was Bryce Young.
Mm-hmm.
The last 2 years, and
That's a good point.
Will Anderson, Bryce Young, Will Anderson, man, possibly the best two players in the country on one
Yes.
team. And eventually, as this program grows, the players will kind of come up to that level, and they'll be mentioned first before Marcus Freeman. And I think the guys in the 24 class kind of get that, right? That it's not about you signing on to come to play for a coach per se. It's Notre Dame, and you come to play with your brothers. So it becomes player driven. And when it comes
Right.
to player driven, guys look at the success of other players and see their success in those that came before them, the predecessors. So
Right.
that's what Notre Dame is trying to build and get to. And CJ Carr is a part of that. He recognizes his place. For him, look, he's basically telling you, as long as they don't hire Bozo the Clown or somebody that just makes me say, ugh,
Yeah.
I'll be at Notre Dame. That's the vibe.
Because Sean, I would say this, right? I mean, I think that's another thing to consider is that, yes, when CJ Carr first makes the commitment, right? It's about Notre Dame. It's about his relationship with the coaches, with Tommy Reese, for instance, right? After that, with 7 other guys now in the class, he's been developing relationships with the class for the last X amount of months, right? So, I mean, is it a blow that Tommy Reese is no longer the offensive coordinator? For sure. No one's going to act like it isn't. But based on everything we're hearing, and I don't want to reiterate the same facts again, as long as Notre Dame does a good job getting another good offensive coordinator in here, I don't think it's going to be any issue at all. I really don't. But we'll see how things work out. But personally, folks, I just wouldn't be worried about that right now. There's other things that you need to figure out, right? Like who's the next offensive coordinator? That's a little more important right now. But it's kind of how I see it. We had another super chat, and thank you again for that one. I see you. We have there we go. From Stephen F. Shaw, I said, who would be your guys' realistic choice, and how potent do you see this offense being this year? So, Sean, all right, let me just say, everybody on the board that we talked about, even some that aren't, who's your choice for offensive coordinator, just based upon what you know now?
Oh, my list is Ludwig, Moorhead, and then probably, honestly, I'll probably go Jason Candle after that. And they're all diverse and have different reasons for why they would be a really good pick. And in my opinion, I'm sure we'll get to it, just a really good successor to Tommy Reese in that position. So, and I think all of those would get me excited. Like, any one of those 3 would get me excited about the potential of this offense. And I think they're walking into a situation where the talent is there to pretty much go put up high 30s per week.
Yeah, I mean, Sean, I think you say it perfectly, man. There are several candidates that I would be very happy with. I mean, I'll be fully transparent about the fact that I don't think Mike Denbrock would like elate excitement. Like I'd be good with it though, right? Because I understand. But for me, Joe Brady would get me pumped. Joe Moorhead would make me happy, would get me pumped. Andy Ludwig would make me pumped. Like those are the three guys for me that I look at and say, those would get me very optimistic and excited about the season. It really would. My personal preference is probably Ludwig one, but like again, you could talk me into Joe Brady. You could talk me into Joe Moorhead as number one. I don't think there's a wrong answer with that top three. I also really like Jason Candle, man. I mean, I think there's a legit conversation about Jason Candle because I think he's an excellent coach and a really smart offensive guy. But I think he is in that next tier for me as far as the guys that I really do want, right? So that's kind of, I guess, Sean, the question is, and you already said high 30s. I mean, I guess the potency of the offense for me, if any of those top three, I think that Notre Dame's in very good spot. So, I mean, just the potency, I think they'll be very improved from last season, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Let's now go to, we had another super chat. Thank you so much from Robert Slatzer. Is Byron Leftwich, a real candidate, or is he someone who you guys think would fit with Marcus Freeman and what he wants to do on offense? Also, what about Jason Candle? So, Sean, we talked about this a little bit, but just kind of hit a couple of your key points that you made earlier about Byron Leftwich. Do you think, first and foremost, is he a real candidate? Remains to be seen, Robert. I'll say this, that, from just things we've heard, I think that there is at least a conversation that needs to happen about Byron Leftwich, right? So is it realistic? Probably not. Is there a conversation that has happened or will happen? I think that that's probably going to happen, right? I wouldn't say he's a front runner. I wouldn't say he's realistic. So it's probably a moot point at the end of it, Sean. But I know that you kind of pointed to a couple things earlier that you think that it actually would be an interesting fit for Notre Dame if it did happen.
Well, he fits the personality and what Marcus Freeman looks for in his coaches, like the type of men they are, as far as family men and how they fit what he wants his coaches to, how he wants them to operate and influence um, the young men that they mentor and coach. So he fits in that mold. Very well respected, but the other questions of whether or not he can recruit and whether or not he's really had his opportunity to spread his wings truly as an offensive coordinator and build his own offense are things that need to be discussed and things that need to, I guess, play out in front of our eyes. But other than that, he definitely fits the type of person that will be on the Notre Dame staff of Marcus Freeman.
Yeah,
that
I think
goes without question.
Yeah, I think the personality would definitely fit. I had the questions that I highlighted, obviously, in the first part of this podcast. But I do think that he's an interesting person to follow. As for Jason Candle, Sean, again, he is the head coach at the University of Toledo, who is, in my estimation, done really well over the last few years with multiple types of quarterbacks. You think about like the Carter Bradleys, working all the way back to like the Logan Woodsides of the world until now he's got a more athletic quarterback, obviously, behind center. For me, Sean, I think that he is a really smart guy, a really smart coach. I would definitely call him. I would personally. Is Notre Dame going to give him a serious look? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, right? But I think that he's a very talented offensive mind that I think deserves a mention because he impresses me. And I think he got offered the Miami job last year, offensive coordinator, turned it down to stay as the head coach. Apparently, Miami's taking another run at him this offseason. So Miami likes him. Miami likes him a lot. So I like Jason Candle, Sean. I don't know if you have an opinion on him, but I really do like him as a coach.
No, I just like pro style guy, creative. For me, I used to be a guy that looked at offenses and wanted like these extremely creative offenses, that could do a lot of things, push the ball down the field. And I've just kind of grown an affinity for simplicity recently. And look, anybody that follows me the last 2 years knows how much I appreciate Todd Monken and what he does. Man, the dude just knows it's something to be said. I think this is why I like what you and Malik have said about Andy Ludwig. It's just something to be said for someone that has an appreciation for what they have. It's not begging for more or go get me this amount of talent. I don't have this, I don't have that. They have an appreciation for what they have, and gosh darn it, they can get the best out of it. I just have an appreciation for guys that have an ability to do that. Right?
And Sean, it's a really interesting point because obviously Andy Ludwig was at Utah a while ago, came back, and he's been there now for a few years. He's had a couple stops in between, but that is actually something that I really love about the Utah program is that Kyle Whittingham has been offered a lot of different jobs, man.
Yes.
Just won't leave.
Won't
and
leave.
I love him for that, man. He's a great coach. What Kyle Whittingham has done at Utah, taking over for what Urban Meyer had started, it's been fantastic, man. Transitioning from a Mountain West team to a legit, I mean, two straight years now they've won the Pac-12 championship, right? I mean, incredible coach. Morgan Scalley, who is the defensive coordinator for them, played at Utah, has been a defensive coordinator for Utah for a long time now. Really smart young defensive coach. I think he's around 40 years old now. He's been offered jobs. Trust me when I tell you. Just won't leave, man. He just won't leave. I love it. I love it. And I mean, selfishly, if Notre Dame doesn't get Andy Ludwig, I hope Andy Ludwig just stays with that staff for the end of time, like I do, because that continuity is great to see because it just doesn't happen a ton anymore.
Yeah, that continuity keeps programs like Utah competitive.
Yep.
Right? That's why coaching matters. It matters. Like you can talk about going out and getting recruits. It's safe to say that we can objectively look back and say the talent at Notre Dame has not been used to its full capability over the last 5 years.
Sure.
Now, you can place the blame wherever you want to place it. That's all you can ask of a coaching staff. Take what you have and get the best out of it. And I'm not sure that we can say that that's taking place at certain points at Notre Dame. That's why we have the narrative, Notre Dame doesn't have talent. Okay, but they always end up with what? The 5th or 6th most players in the NFL every year on active rosters, but they don't have talent. Go figure.
Oh, man. And Sean, one more point to the Utah continuity conversation. Schools like that need that too, right? Because it's not like Utah is going to throw the bag at this offensive or defensive coordinator, right? Like you need those types of guys because that's that you need that continuity in a place like that. So just final note, I really do like I like the brand of football that Utah plays in general. Like they're just tough, hard-nosed team. They have some limitations athletically, but they're incredibly well coached, and they always are.
Yes.
So
that's on both sides of the ball.
Yes.
Both sides of the ball. Because on the defense side of the ball, you just spoke about the coordinator. They lost, when I tell you they lost a whale of a linebacker.
Stephen Lloyd, yeah.
And used freshmen to replace him. And the way those freshmen played at the end of the year, especially in that Pac-12 championship game, I was like, okay, they're coached up really well.
Yes.
It's easy to see that they're coached up really well. So when you watch Devin Lloyd in the pros with Jaguars, right?
Yes.
Yeah. He was the one that came down on Mahomes' ankle, wasn't he?
May have been. I can't remember who it was.
No, he wasn't. It was a defensive end. But it doesn't need to here nor there. But no, that coached really well.
Yeah, man. No, they really are. And again, the continuity is a big part of it. They have found great coaches that buy into the program, which is why Utah has been consistent. That's why they've been a consistently good football team. We had a question from 99 Problems with BK1. He said, and Sean, I kind of answered this one already, but just kind of want to reiterate a couple facts. Said mailbag, specifically with regards to CJ Carr. How much do you think Tommy Rees leaving impacts his recruitment? Does it open the door for teams like Ohio State and Michigan to get back into things? So 99 Problems, we hit on this a little bit earlier in the mailbag portion, but I think I will say also is I think that unless catastrophe happens, everything's going to be good, man. Like, so let's just enjoy this conversation. Let's enjoy this process. I think everything's going to be good. And we'll obviously, after we see who the next offensive coordinator is, I'll have an update on boards.irishbreakdown.com as far as what the commits think about the new coach and all that great stuff, right? And which will be important. So, but just kind of reiterate some facts. As long as they get a good offensive coordinator, I don't think it's going to be an issue at all. I've gotten replies from several commits in the class of stuff like, I'm locked in. Like, it has no impact on me whatsoever. I bought into Notre Dame. I love the people. I love the other commits in the class. All the stuff that you want to hear through a situation like this. Also had a question here from Seth Clark, Sean, who said, how likely do you think Joe Brady is going to get an interview on a scale of 1 to 10?
Well, it's two types of interviews. Are we just talking Zoom interview or like in person where he comes on campus? I think he gets a Zoom interview.
Okay, so all right, so you're confident about a 10 that Notre Dame is going to reach out and demonstrate some sort of interest to at least get him on the phone or on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In person, I think it's a different animal because there's mixed reports, right? I mean, some say that Joe Brady would be open to the conversation. Some say that he just doesn't want to go back to college, right? If it's the latter, then why would you make the trip to South Bend if you have no interest in going back to college football?
You usually make trips when, you're interested in that destination. I'm just saying.
Yes. And I mean, just point blank, right? If you don't want to go back to college, why would you go to a college, right? Like, why would you go interview at a college? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And it's not like I think he's making a little over $1 million per year as like the Bills quarterback coach. Could he make more at Notre Dame? Sure, but like if he doesn't love college football, though, does it really matter if he gets a little bit more money? You know what I mean? So,
I mean, do you want to spend the next month and a half going and chilling at pro days, or do you want to spend the next month and a half recruiting?
Right. I would rather go to pro days. That's just me, though.
Yeah.
Just me.
I probably would agree with you there, Double R.
Yeah, man. So we had a question from Nathan Milton, formerly Milton fan. What's up, Milton fan? Thank you for the super chat. Any thoughts on the Tim Brown tweets, Sean? So I'm going to paraphrase this.
It was a masterpiece.
Paraphrasing, I'm not going to read it word for word, but basically Tim Brown said, this is a great thing for Notre Dame. It's also a great thing for Tommy Rees, which I think we know what that means, right?
Yeah.
We have to say it. But I mean, any thoughts, honestly, Sean? Though, I mean, for me, I think that this change can be good for both sides. I do. I think it can be beneficial.
Yeah.
I have had my issues with Tommy Rees from a play calling perspective. Could it get better in 2023 with the new play caller? It's possible. It's very possible. I think that Notre Dame has a chance to upgrade the offensive coordinator position this offseason. Point blank, period. It's also good for Tommy Rees because he's going to get paid and he gets to be around Nick Saban and it gets to help his track, right? So I think it's beneficial for both sides. I do. Do it, Sean. Come on. I'm seeing it.
You have to. Tim crafted it so well.
Yeah.
That, if you were talking to Tim like in a barbershop, it would have been totally different. Like, he was very well aware that he was about to tweet this out. He was very careful how he crafted it, but he got his point across. Point across. And I think he speaks for, he's not the only former player that took issue with the offense. And he said, I've been in person and wanted to knock on, I think the second part was, I've been in person and wanted to knock on the window, on the play call window during games. Like, yo, give me the play sheet.
Yeah.
Or let me do it. So he let his feelings, he was very transparent and allowing you to see what he thought about the Notre Dame offense recently and how excited he is that now someone new is coming in. So
right.
I thought it was masterful.
It was funny. Funny. And there's some truth. There's, some things to be figured out, but we'll see. Sean, we had another. Sorry,
I was going to say, shout out to the friends of Tommy Rees coming to his defense.
You can always count on Junior, man. You can always count on him. 99 Problems BK1 says, mailbag, how are we feeling about Justin Scott on a level of 1 to 10? How confident are you that he signs with the Irish when all is said and done? Sean, I mean, so we don't have really an update, right? I mean, basically push back his commitment date. We don't know exactly when the commitment date's going to be, but we expect him to take some visits. And, I still think that Notre Dame is the leader, but I don't think a ton has changed as far as the hierarchy of the order. But, Sean, I guess, it was a question. So how confident are you feeling right now?
To be honest, I kind of left them alone right now.
What you should.
Left them alone. They got into a stretch of really tough games in conference. So I let him focus on that because that's what he wanted to do. And I'll be checking him out Friday. So
Gotcha.
Next Monday, I hope to have some more information, but I'll be checking him out this Friday.
Yeah, and I think at where he is in this recruitment, like, you don't want to overload him with attention, right? Like, he's got some soul searching to do, man. Like, and it's totally understandable. I completely get it. So
I know. I will say this: some people I heard, and I actually tweeted this out, that I heard someone say Georgia was his dream school.
Yeah, I saw that too.
And I thought that was the biggest piece of fertilizer I've ever.
Yeah, I saw that one too, Sean. I'm like, look, guys, could he end up at Georgia? I guess anything's possible, right? Does that mean that it was his dream school? Nah, that's not what that means. It's not what that means.
Georgia wasn't even on the radar last year.
Yep.
But that's his dream school. I don't know about you. My dream school would always be in my top 5, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess people would say, the offer just came or whatever. But, I mean, I just talked to a recruit like a few days ago that said, this team is their dream school. They hadn't offered them, like a dream school is the school that you want to go to, right? Like it's a little different, but yeah. Let's go to this next question from Johnny S. Said, mailbag, what timeline would you like to see Notre Dame follow in hiring an offensive coordinator? I don't think that this could be look, could it be? I'm not going to say it couldn't be, but I would rather this one be done within a week or so. I don't want this to be like a 10-day, 2-week process. Like I do think there has to be some speed to this, in my opinion, because you're getting very close to spring ball, Sean. The recruiting implications we've talked about, spring ball getting close. I do think you want to get somebody in-house in the next few days. I do. Or at least settle on it. Not necessarily the hiring has to become official, right? But you want to know who your guy is, in my opinion.
You want to, I'm speaking from a PR standpoint, media standpoint, right? There's no reason to publicly say anything about the process this week. It's going to be overshadowed all week. It's Super Bowl week. The earliest you say something or announce someone is next Tuesday, at the earliest, in my opinion, right? Because the day after, you're still going to be talking about the Super Bowl. It's the day after. It's almost like a national holiday. That Tuesday, though, now it's Notre Dame. It's your show. It's your show, right? Because the NFL is pretty much on chill mode until free agency and the combine, which is March. So now it's your show, right? So next Tuesday, Wednesday, I think by this weekend, people will be on campus. That's the best way to do it. While everybody's going crazy about the Super Bowl, you sneak people in town, get them on campus, interview them, come to your decision next Tuesday or Wednesday. Yeah. Either bring people back for a second interview or make your decision. So I think next Tuesday or Wednesday, we should hear at least that this person has become the front runner, according to reports, for Notre Dame's OC job.
Yep. No doubt. We also have a question from Tommy Doesn't Like Ireland. That is, Sean, were you on the show when someone talked about this? So 2012, Tommy Rees was suspended for the game, so he didn't make the trip to Ireland.
Right.
2020 was COVID, right? Or whatever. And then now he's obviously not going to be in Ireland for the opener this week. So
Yeah.
someone joked, it was like, yeah, Tommy just doesn't like Ireland, man. Like he just doesn't want to go to Ireland, which is hysterical. But Tommy doesn't like Ireland, who apparently it's Broke Neck Boy says that tight end that decommitted from Bama is going to start a trend at Bama ? So obviously, Martavius Collins was the tight end that was committed to Alabama. He just announced his decommitment today. I was told that this was something that was going to happen for a couple weeks, Sean. I don't think this is necessarily look, it's funny and stuff, but I don't think this was an impulse to Tommy Rees being hired as the offensive coordinator. Like Martavius Collins was kind of always was trending for a few weeks to decommitting. So this wasn't a Tommy Rees thing. I think that
I saw the news on Twitter and was like,
right, yeah. That's what people want to hear, but it's not. Yeah, it's not actual. It's not actually what happened. But I mean, Sean, it's something where I think that this happens occasionally when there's a coaching change in general, right? I mean,
yeah,
you had a different offensive coordinator. Martavius Collins was committed, and then you're not bringing the coordinator back and. Transition stuff happens, right? So I don't think this is a Tommy Rees impulse. I think this is more a not great fit impulse and new offensive coordinator impulse. Is it going to be a trend at Alabama? I don't think so. I wouldn't say that at all.
Do you feel like he betrayed Notre Dame?
Who's that? Tommy Rees? Nah, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that.
I didn't. Did you? Because we haven't had a chance to talk about it. Did you feel like it was a lateral move?
Oh, it's definitely not a lateral move. No, you can't say that right now. You can't say that right now. Yeah,
it's just interesting questions and comments that I've been seeing all weekend about the situation, and I'm just like, man, I always felt like if I were him, I literally felt like I could flip a coin and make the right decision. If I were Tommy Rees, I really felt like no matter what decision he made, he couldn't lose.
Yeah. No, I mean, if he would have came back to Notre Dame, I think that it would have made a ton of sense for him, right? I mean, it's where he's from, it's where he's coached, it's the school he's known, and he had a chance to do something great, obviously, in 2023 with Notre Dame. I wouldn't call. I mean, some people I saw call him like Benedict Arnold, called him all this stuff. Look, man, at the end of the day, I'll portray it like this, Sean. If I got a big offer, like a considerable offer to a place that I consider to be a step up, right? Mm-hmm. Would you call me a Benedict Arnold for that? I wouldn't say that, man. I don't have that conversation. I don't believe that for a person that is trying to better what they perceive to be a better situation. I don't pass judgment in that regard. He did what he thought was best for him. I don't hold that against him.
I'm amazed at how many people took that Benedict Arnold thing to heart. Like he did not see himself being here long term. It's been obvious.
Right.
So I don't take it as him betraying anyone when he has shown us this is my desire. This is where I see my career going. So I think we all, maybe some of us ignored it. Right. I think it's been clear.
Yeah, I mean, Tommy wasn't going to be a lifer at Notre Dame. He wasn't going to be here for the next 30 years coaching, right? Like that was never going to happen. And I know people are like, it's technically a lateral. No, is it though? I mean, because if you look at the track record, I mean, Alabama's won a lot, obviously, right? I mean, and Nick Saban's got a lot of coaches to the next level after that. So
what was the last Notre Dame assistant to go to the NFL?
It's a good question. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, and I mean, I'm sure there's somebody I'm not thinking about. Do you know the answer to that, or you just really start the conversation?
I just knew it didn't match with the track record of Alabama assistants.
Oh, it's definitely not the track record of Alabama. It's definitely not the track record of Alabama.
Yeah, that's all I need to know.
Yeah, yep. So I don't. Yeah. I don't hold anything against. Someone said Harry Heastan. There you go. I completely forgot about Harry going to the Bears. That's a good one.
Oh, Harry left because he just couldn't stand the head coach.
True, but I mean, he still went from college to the NFL.
I mean,
so if it's your parameters,
if that's the one you want to rock with, technically, okay.
Yeah.
But
someone said LaFleur, who we talked about earlier, obviously went to the NFL after that. So
as a coach,
wasn't he? What was LaFleur technically though? Was he a GA? Was he an analyst?
He was a GA for Malik.
Yeah.
He was a GA for Malik when he got here in 13, and then I don't know how he moved up. But still, we're going back. Look at what we're doing. We're going back, what, 5-6 years?
Yeah. At least more than that. Yeah. It's an interesting question, though. So we had another question here. Sean, as we roll through these, 91 problems with BK. What a lot of great questions from him today. So what's the general mood of this team from Tommy leaving? Mickey seemed heartbroken. How is everybody else? How is the 2023 class specifically? So, I mean, honestly, man, I haven't talked to a ton of the 2023 class about it, Sean, because they're already a part of the program. I focus more on the kids that aren't a part of the program, right? So I focus on the 2024 class. From the general, just people putting stuff out there. This is my opinion. This is partly my opinion, but also, it has some context to it. Like you see how people react to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that coaches, I think the players are upset about it. I mean, sure. I mean, he's their coach, right? I mean, even if you don't agree with everything a coach does or see eye to eye all the time, it's still a sad moment when you lose a coach as a player. I mean, it is. And I do think Tommy Rees was liked through the program. Like, I don't think he was a disliked person. So, I mean, 99 problems for me personally, just my outsider's perspective, I would assume that they were a little upset about it, I mean, but I also think that Sean hit something on the nail on the head, Sean. I think most people didn't expect Tommy Rees to be at Notre Dame forever, right? So they understand that this is a part of the deal. It's a part of the deal. But so there we are with it, man.
I can only surmise from a couple of the tweets that I did see, the jab that Jaden Mickey took at him on IG.
Yeah.
And just some other things that it might be a chip on their shoulder going into the season. Like, oh, okay, you think they're better than us? You think going there is better than being here with us? Okay. And I think a lot of Logan Diggs, his tweet was it was congratulatory, but it was very snarky. Like, oh, okay, I guess you got to do what you got to do then. So I think we're going to see a team that is kind of pushed by this and self-motivated, like regardless of who the new OC is. Like,
right.
They feel like they have a ton of talent offensively.
Sure.
And we'll see.
Yep, we shall see. We'll see. At the end of the day, the results will set us free. We are not. Marshall says, Ryan, Sean, of the candidates that have been discussed, who is a significant upgrade over Tommy Rees? So, Sean, we're not going to do this from the full scope. I mean, like, let's work through a couple of these guys, and you just tell me your impulse on, do you think they're an upgrade just as an offensive coordinator? I'm not talking about a recruiter. I'm just talking strictly calling a football game, all right, of what you know. So let's do it that way. Let's start with Joe Brady.
Yes.
I would agree.
Proven.
Yes. I agree. I think that Joe Brady has shown that the highs are much higher. Andy Ludwig.
Yes.
I also agree. Better game caller as of what I've seen so far. Could Tommy get to that point? It's possible, but as of right now, Andy Ludwig is definitely a more proven product. Joe Moorhead is a much more proven product. I mean, would you argue against that one, Sean?
No. But I will say this.
Yeah.
And this is something that Malik pointed out. He said, look, Andy Ludwig and Tommy are kind of in the same ballpark. He said, they really are. He said, kind of in the same ballpark. He said, the only difference is that all of the different creative stuff, he's like, Andy Ludwig doesn't need that. He said he's creative without being over the top creative. And he gave an example. He said, look, Tyler Buckner shouldn't have thrown a pick six against South Carolina, but Andy Ludwig doesn't put him in that position. Andy Ludwig doesn't call that play. He doesn't bring the motion guy across to bring attention from that side to give the backside safety and the ability to come across. He's like, those are the type of things that you don't get in that situation. He said he's a better situational play caller. And I said, you know what? From that standpoint, I'll trust you.
Yep.
So yeah, it's there. Look, you can just the answer is yes for me, pretty
Yes.
much on everyone until maybe you get. Well, no, there wasn't any.
Well,
I
Sean,
mean,
can I
I would question Byron Leftwich only because I don't know.
You don't know, right? And how good would Jason Candle be jumping up from the MAC to Notre Dame stage, right? Like that would be a question that I would have.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I don't know if you agree with this one. Let me say a statement and see if you agree with it or not. And please push back if you don't. Mike Denbrock has a much higher floor, and I trust him a lot more than Tommy Rees right now as a play caller. I would say, though, that maybe Tommy has a little more upside as a play caller from what I've seen. Just my opinion.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Especially in big games. Like in big games, I've seen Mike Denbrock kind of dial it back and kind of, you go watch the first game against Florida State in that first half. It was very vanilla. You go watch Cincinnati against Alabama in the semifinal. Just very, like, dude, this is Alabama. Like, this is Cincinnati's opportunity on the big stage. And this is the game plan you put together? So, yeah, I agree with you, bro. I agree with you. That's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, because I think in the same situation, I think that there is a possibility where Tommy gets out a better game plan than Mike Denbrock. But I think the week-to-week consistency is where Denbrock wins that one, right? Like you can more depend on Denbrock from game 1 to game 8. So you can't always depend on Tommy from a week-to-week perspective. I mean, occasionally he'll bring one out, like the North Carolina game, like the South Carolina game, where you're like, all right, I like that, man. That looks nice. But then you'll have the Stanford game. Then you'll have the Marshall game and everything in between. So, yeah. So I just think consistency is a different level. But I still do. I do think that Tommy Rees has upside as an offense coordinator. I still do. I do. I think he's smart. I really do.
You know what he is?
What's that?
I think he's going to be a late bloomer.
Because he's only 31, right?
But that, I mean, from experience, not looking at his age.
Uh-huh.
To me, he is a fantastic composer, singer-songwriter right now.
Okay.
Can't necessarily get it across. He can write it up. He can write it up, right? He can demo it for you.
But he can't deliver it.
But he can't deliver it.
I get that.
Right now. And sometimes it takes a little bit more seasoning for certain artists to kind of be able to take that next step. And that's him right now. Yep. And maybe he's able to take it in Tuscaloosa. But like you said, well, I'll take that back because Alabama usually has a trash schedule except for like 2 games every year. So
yes.
I don't know how much he'll actually be tested, but you got the LSU game, you got the Tennessee game, and the Auburn game. That's pretty much it.
Yep, it's not. It typically isn't the hardest of schedules for Alabama, and yeah. Let's go to this one, Sean. We only have a few more left. We're gonna hit. Rob Tidoff says, Ryan and Sean, are we closer to a championship offensively or defensively? Sean, I'm gonna say my impulse, and you go with it. Okay.
See, that's a trick question, Rob, and you almost got me. That's a trick question.
Is it a trick question?
It's a trick question. See, you want me to go with the present. Rob, I see what you're doing. You want me to fall in love with Sam Hartman and all of the offensive weapons. That's what you want me to do. But if I look at Notre Dame historically, the only thing that's really stopped Notre Dame defensively is not having the biggins in the middle and being able to shut down the run game. Other than that, Notre Dame has kept their football teams in games while the offenses have struggled. Rob tried to get me with it. That's a trick question. But I'm not going to fall in love. I'm not going to be a lover of the moment. I'm not doing that, Ryan.
Well, Sean, you see, man, I am going to fall into this trap, Robinson.
Go right ahead.
because a year ago at this time, I would have said defense without even thinking twice about it. I would have been like, defense, easy money, right? I mean, easy, not even thinking twice. As we are standing right now, and there's a caveat to it, as long as Notre Dame hires a good offensive coordinator, I love the future of the offense for Notre Dame, the present and the future, because you have a great offensive line coming back. You have some talented wide receivers. You got some dudes at running back. You have a proven commodity at quarterback, talent in the room behind it. Defensively, I think there's some holes, man. I do think there's a couple holes. And I'm not as in love with the direction of the defensive play calling right now. So I'll go offense. I will go offense.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But I'm going to stick to the tradition.
That's fine.
It's the defense that's kept us in games. Now,
you're not wrong about that. You're not wrong about that.
If we can get a couple of guys in the 24 class, if we can get them in the middle of that defensive line, and the linebackers I know have already been upgraded. The secondary, look, if we're going to rank position groups, the defensive back room has to be top 3.
Cornerbacks especially, no doubt about it. Yeah.
It has to be. So, I mean, look, we have a few questions on defense, but I'm going to go ahead and plant my flag with the defense.
I love it, man.
They said it's offense in 2023. See, I think bigger than that. It's always been defense, dude.
You're a long-term thinker, my friends. You're a long-term thinker. I love it.
Absolutely. Congratulations to the offense finally catching up, though.
They have caught up pretty quick. I mean, well, in theory, they're going to catch up pretty quick, but we'll see. We'll see. We had a question from Jacob Watson. Mailbag. Who would you guys select that would be the best recruiter, quarterback coach, and offensive coordinator? Is there one that is more well-balanced? Sean, that's interesting, okay? So, out of the group that we talked about today, we talked about Joe Brady, we talked about Joe Moorhead, we talked about Andy Ludwig, talked about Byron Leftwich, we talked about Jason Candle, right? Yeah. Am I missing somebody? I think that was pretty much all we hit. Yeah, who is the best recruiter of that bunch? And Denbrock. We've talked about Mike Denbrock as well. Who's the best recruiter?
The best recruiter of the bunch?
As of what we know right now.
I think Moorhead would be the best recruiter I've ever talked about, right?
I would say Moorhead, yeah. I would say Moorhead right now.
I would be interested in seeing where Candle ranked, because you really can't look at him. It's apples and oranges to look at him nationally, but where do his recruiting classes rank in the MAC?
Sure. That would be an interesting conversation. Sean, it's almost like last year when I did like the recruiting profiles for the new coaches. And I remember we showed, I did one on Dylan McCullough, right? Mm-hmm. And it was like, Dylan has a great reputation as a recruiter. And we've seen it already at Notre Dame, but the names that he pulled at Indiana didn't really like knock your socks off, right? Because why would they, right? I mean, so
was Tevin Coleman already there when he got there?
Tevin Coleman was already there. Okay. And he went to USC for a year, and Ronald Jones was already on the roster too. The best recruit that he ever had from a ranking perspective, I think he was the Marquis Step guy at USC. He got Marquis Step.
Oh, so he was the one that flipped Marquis Step, huh?
Yeah. Oh, so I'm pretty sure that was the highest recruit he had ever had before Jeremiah Love. So yeah. But I think we're in agreement though, right? Joe Moorhead, best recruiter.
Yeah.
Best quarterback coach. My impulse is actually saying Joe Moorhead or Andy Ludwig is actually that's where my mind goes.
Yeah.
Because Andy Ludwig, I mean, talk about developing not great quarterback. I mean, like he had Cameron Rising put into his lap, developed him into a pretty dang good player. Joe Moorhead's actually done a lot with little. Actually, I would go Joe Moorhead there. I would go.
Now, when you're coaching this position, especially if you're doing both, you're coaching to your system.
Correct. Yep.
Right?
Yes.
So I would probably have to go with. I would give the slight edge to Moorhead because of the quarterbacks that are either coming or exist in the quarterback room right now outside of Sam Hartman.
Because, Sean, I would say it like this. Like, look at the track record, right?
Yeah.
He developed Trace McSorley into a baller. Trace McSorley is not a true quarterback. He's a really great athlete, like no doubt. But Anthony Brown, he made look like a good football player at Oregon. We know that Anthony Brown is not a good football player. Yeah. We know this, right?
Notre Dame fans saw how we pounded him when he was at BC. So
exactly. So I quarterback coach for me would be Moorhead as well.
Yeah.
Offensive coordinator, that's
I would be interested in Leftwich would be interesting as like a quarterback coach, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be interesting tape to see how he would do. But yeah, I would go Moorhead.
As the quarterback coach? Yeah. Offensive coordinator, Sean, I might actually go Andy Ludwig. That might be my pick, I think. I love how he calls the game, man. I think he calls a really good football game.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that.
I mean, we'll talk about getting a lot out of little. Again, I go back to what he's done over the last couple of years at Utah with the average talent. It's nice, man. A lot of it's scheme-driven, too. Yeah. A lot of it is scheme-driven. So I would go with him.
Yeah.
That's a great question, though, Jacob. We might have to do another show on that. That's a really good one. A couple more left. @_VR. Any updates on CJ Scar stemming from Tommy Rees? Oh, we already hit this one. I mean, so we mentioned this a couple comments already. CJ, I think CJ is locked in from everything we're hearing, right? As long as they hire a good offensive coordinator, I think that everything will be just fine. I don't think that any issues will arise. From Milton Fan, Nathan Milton, formerly Milton Fan, just said, any word on whether Chip Long would take an analyst job at Notre Dame? I have no idea, Milton Fan. Like we threw out the conversation because Chip's like a well-respected guy. I don't know if he would take an analyst job at this point. I don't know. So we'll update you though as we kind of hear a little bit more on that. And then the last question, Sean, we have from Ben Tarnowski, says, mailbag, if we got Joe Brady, do you think he'd kind of be 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and we'd be replacing him in a year or two?
That's something we talked about, right? Marcus Freeman needs a guy, and we'll be looking for someone that wants to be here. Absolutely. He is not looking to be in this position once again a year from now. That's one of the things for me that makes the Andy Ludwig situation very interesting, because you just said coaches at Utah just don't leave, man. And there's a reason for that. Their families are there. They're comfortable with that. They're part of the community. Yes, Notre Dame would be a fantastic improvement from a positional standpoint, brand standpoint, probably a better shot at winning a national championship. But is that what he wants right now?
Yeah, I think, for me, Ben, because I think Sean's hitting a lot of great points. He's been a quarterback coach last year. Is this a move that would just be to get back in the offense coordinator side of things and then use as a stepping stone? Like, I don't know, right? Yeah. And I do think there needs to be some stability. So it'll be interesting to see. But that is going to conclude the show today, Sean. That'll be conclude the podcast, the mailbag portion of this podcast. Before you go, do not go anywhere yet. Hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast. 5-star reviews are very much appreciated. Hit that notification bell. Boris at irishbreakdown.com. We'll be having a lot more recruiting updates over the next week or so, because last week was kind of centered around the NFL draft side of things with the Senior Bowl. I'll also be back doing my show on Thursday night from an NFL draft segment. Make sure to check out the Lucky Lefty podcast and everything else we do on CFB Nation. You can subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. Thank you all so much. Make sure to go back and listen to the Carson Hobbs interview. Make sure to go back and listen to a little explanation of the new Notre Dame offensive coordinator search and how it could affect recruiting. We appreciate you all. From Ryan, that is Sean. Thank you so much for joining the Recruiting Hour on the Irish Breakdown podcast.